Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the planning meeting of the 14th of October. I'm going to introduce the clerk, Lorraine, who will explain first of all how the meeting will run.
Please note that we are live streaming this meeting via the Council's YouTube channel to encourage more people to engage in our public meetings. The proceedings of the meeting will also be recorded. Please can I remind everyone to use their microphones when speaking and turn them off when finished. Please can attendees in person refrain from watching the live stream, as this will cause interference for our viewers. Please also ensure that your mobile phones and iPads are turned to silent. We are not expecting any fire alarm tests today. In the event of evacuation, please leave by the nearest exit and gather in the car park next to the library opposite Tesco. Should any members of the public need to use the toilet facilities, please make yourself known to the security guard who will provide access. In accordance with the Constitution, members of the public who have registered to speak will be permitted to do so when invited by the Chair. I have confirmed those entitled to speak. Please note that registered speakers are not permitted to approach committee members or distribute documentation to the committee during the course of this meeting. Each application will be dealt with in the following order. The planning officer will present the submitted application and will outline the proposed recommendation in full. Any speakers registered to speak on the application will be invited to address the committee. This will be taken in the following order. Speakers against, neighbourhood forum representatives, any councillors who are not members of the committee, followed by speakers in support of the application. All speakers will have a maximum of 5 minutes each to address the meeting. This will be followed by questions from members and responses from the planning officer. Once questions from the committee have concluded, the Chair will open the application for debate. At the conclusion of the debate, the Chair will seek a proposer and a seconder for the application. The proposal must be in full and include all information, such as conditions or reasons. The Chair will then confirm with the planning officer if they wish to enter into a period of summing up. Members, if at any point you leave the meeting for any reason during the consideration of any application, you will be unable to vote on that application. I will now hand the chairing of the meeting to the Chair, Councillor Brooke.
Thank you for that, Lorraine. Just check, are there any apologies or updates to the membership of the committee?
Yes, we have one apology from Councillor Mandy Darling.
Thank you. Just moving on to the minutes, members have a record of the minutes of the committee meeting the 24th of June. Can I have a proposer? Councillor Tolchard. And a seconder? Councillor Billings. All in favour? Raise your hands. All. Okay, thank you. Okay.
Thank you. Do I need to read that?
Thank you. Just moving on to declarations of interest. First of all, the members of the planning committee, have any of you any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests on any of the items on our agenda today? No? And then officers, have any pecuniary or non-pecuniary interests? No? Thank you. Look, do we have any urgent items?
No, Chair.
Thank you. Excellent. Well, we'll move straight on now then to item 5. This is to consider an application for 41 Sands Road, Paignton, application number P/2024/0529. Lorraine has confirmed there are 2 registered speakers for this item. I'll now ask Verity Clark to introduce the application, please.
Thank you, Chair. Okay, so the application site is 41 Sands Road, which is a semi-detached property in use as a C1 guest house, which has got 8 to 9 rooms with owner's accommodation, known as the Seacroft Guest House. So the guest house is spread over 4 floors. So this is an aerial photo of the site. In terms of designations, the site is within a community investment area and is within the Paignton Neighbourhood Plan Core Tourism Investment Area, but it is outside of the local plan Core Tourism Investment Area allocation. I'm just going to bring up the little laser pointer. So you can just see on the aerial photo that we've got, this is the site here, and you can see just how close it is in proximity to the seafront. We've got the esplanade along here, so very close. So the site's located in flood zone 2 and 3 and a critical drainage area. So the Roundham and Paignton Harbour Conservation Area is located to the south of the site, with the boundary starting in the middle of Sands Road. So just along here is the boundary of the conservation area, which then goes south. So surrounding uses are a mix of residential and holiday accommodation. So as an update to members, since the writing of the committee report, one additional letter of support and one letter of objection has been received. No new material planning considerations have been raised in these comments. So this plan shows the existing site layout. You can see the site benefits from a driveway for 6 cars with a vehicular access point onto Adelphi Lane. There's a front terrace garden facing Sands Road and a rear internal courtyard garden. So this next plan shows the existing basement and ground floor plans. So the basement is currently used as owner's accommodation, with the ground floor featuring 2 ensuite bedrooms, a conservatory and dining areas for guests. There are also a kitchen and utility area. So the plan now showing are the existing first and second floors. At first floor level, there are 5 ensuite bedrooms and 1 bedroom sort of storeroom. At second floor level is 1 bedsit room, which features a kitchenette and bathroom. There's also storage rooms, however these have got limited head height, so appear larger on the plan than in reality. So this plan details the proposed basement and ground floor plan. So permission is sought for the change of use of the building to a Sui Generis large HMO for YMCA supported housing. The application has come forward in conjunction with application P/2024/0374 for the attached semi-detached property at 39 Sands Road, which is next on the committee agenda. So this proposal will result in 9 bedrooms with communal facilities, including a shared sitting and dining rooms and a conservatory, and that's for use in conjunction with the occupiers of 39 Sands Road, and a kitchen and utility room, just for the use of these occupiers. So the basement level will feature a lobby/hall area, bathroom and bedroom. At ground floor level, there will be 2 separate ensuite bedrooms and the shared facilities of the sitting and dining rooms, conservatory and kitchen with utility. So this is the proposed first and second floor plan. At first floor level, there will be 5 ensuite bedrooms and a storeroom, and at second floor level, there will be 1 ensuite bedroom with 2 storage rooms. No external changes are proposed to the building. However, it has been confirmed that signage relating to the holiday use will be removed. The vehicular access will be unchanged and will continue to be via Adelphi Lane. So the property will be run by the YMCA Exeter, which is a registered provider, as affordable housing, let at social rents and operated as supported accommodation for young people aged between 18 to 25 years old, with a direct connection locally to Torbay. 9 single occupancy rooms with shared facilities will be provided, where occupants will receive support relating to employment, meaningful occupation, training and education, and will engage in work placements, educational placements, volunteering or engagement within the service itself, or social enterprise projects that the service develops. All young people will have named support workers, a personalised support plan, access to therapeutic services and counselling, regular groups, workshops, and social sporting and creative activities. So young people will live in this stage 2 move-on accommodation whilst they engage in the EMOTE programme. Engagement in the programme is a requirement of being referred to the programme and a requirement within their excluded licence agreement for continued occupation. Young people will progress through the programme at differing speeds and in different routes. So the general time frame for stage 2 accommodation is between 6 to 12 months. Sometimes this extends to 18 months due to the need to access a particular type of move-on accommodation, affordability or suitability of options for move-on, or the need to extend to avoid a person moving on prematurely before they're fully equipped to do so. So for this reason, and as the availability of accommodation can differ between local authorities, the maximum length of stay is set by the YMCA at 3 years. So on-site staffing will be shared between the application site and the adjacent 39 Sands Road, with staff present between 9 a.m. to 10 p.m, after which staffing provision remains on call. So this is a photo taken of the front of the site from Sands Road, where you can see the existing front garden area. So here we've got an image taken from Google Street View in 2022, again which shows the frontage of the property from Sands Road, but just in a bit more context. Then we've got this image taken from Adelphi Lane, which shows the eastern elevation and part of the parking area. And then we've got this image, which shows the main part of the parking area, accessed from Adelphi Lane. And then lastly, this image shows the pleasant courtyard garden located behind the parking area. So this slide lists the key material considerations, which are considered in detail in the committee report, which I'll briefly run through now. So in terms of the principle of development, housing and affordable housing, the committee report goes into significant detail on these issues and confirms that the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and the tilted balance in favour of sustainable development is therefore engaged. The formation of the proposed supported accommodation is considered to carry limited weight, given the proposal is for the formation of one HMO unit with 9 rooms. The proposal would create a 9-bedroom HMO, which would constitute affordable housing, which is let at social rents and operated as supported accommodation for young people aged between 18 to 25, with a direct connection locally to Torbay. The provision will assist in delivering a key element of the council's homelessness and rough sleeping strategy. So the delivery of move-on accommodation is essential to enable a working pathway where those young people that find themselves at the point of homelessness are prevented from doing so and or are moved out of the council's emergency temporary accommodation. So evidence from national data available for 22-23 shows that Torbay continues to see a high proportion of households per 1,000 assessed as homeless compared to the national average, with 15% of presentations being between 18 to 24 years old. So the grant funding by which this accommodation would be provided is through a government initiative called SHAP, which is Single Homeless Accommodation Programme. This grant programme was by invite only around specific cohorts, one of which was homelessness relating to young people. Therefore, the need and significance is recognised by central government. Placements at the accommodation would be undertaken in partnership with the council, enabling full control over allocations with restrictions for local residents, and it is recommended that this is secured by a planning condition, which also restricts the use specifically to the proposed YMCA operation. The management plan provides certainty around the proposed use, client group and operation of the site, and the HMO use provides an accommodation type which meets the needs of the future occupiers. This accommodation type is designed as stage 2 move-on accommodation, which provides a stepping stone for residents through the 4 stages of the YMCA's pathway of supported accommodation. This move-on accommodation is specifically designed as temporary accommodation, which will directly help to close the gap between the most and least disadvantaged people and neighbourhoods in Torbay, and promote social inclusion and access to housing. The proposed use, including the day-to-day operations of the site, which will feature occupants undertaking off-site activities such as employment or education, is considered to have a positive impact on the community investment area, with the use blending in with other residential uses. The proposal will result in an HMO and is considered to accord with the requirements of Policy H4 of the local plan. Overall, the proposal will result in an HMO run as affordable housing, let at social rents and operated as supported accommodation, which targets a key demographic with a high proportion of households per 1,000 assessed as homeless. The proposed use is considered to contribute to improving the sustainability of existing and new communities within Torbay, and especially the way in which it closes the gap between the most and least disadvantaged neighbourhoods, and the use is considered compatible with the surrounding mixture of tourist accommodation and residential dwellings. As such, the principal development is considered to accord with policies SS11, SS13, H1, H4 and H6 of the local plan. So moving on to tourism issues, the site is not within the core tourism investment area allocation of the local plan, but is allocated as such within the Paignton neighbourhood plan. So policy TO2 of the local plan states that outside core tourism investment areas, the change of use of holiday accommodation will be allowed where the holiday character of the area and range of facilities and accommodation offered are not undermined and one or more of the three criteria are met. In this instance, the proposal is for an HMO, however the proposed use, which is not that of a traditional HMO but one of supported accommodation, is not considered to conflict with the tourism character and offer of the bay, given the details contained within the management plan. However, the site is well located for tourism and provides high quality accommodation with good reviews. Given the quality of the accommodation, it is considered that the loss of the guest house would detract from the range of facilities available in Torbay, although the change of use of the property to supported accommodation is not considered to undermine the holiday character of the area. Given the details submitted in relation to the net profit, the decline in bed and breakfast popularity and modern expectations, it is reasonable to consider that it is unlikely that there is a reasonable prospect of the site being used for tourism in the future, although the evidence and commentary provided is not considered to provide outright confirmation that there is no reasonable prospect of a continuing tourist use, particularly given the short marketing history. The last point within TO2 of the local plan is that the redevelopment or change of use will bring regeneration or other benefits that outweigh the loss of holiday accommodation or facilities. The proposal is considered to meet this point, however overall the proposal is considered to be contrary to policy TO2. The proposal is also considered contrary to policy PMP 14 of the neighbourhood plan, given the proposed use is an HMO of sort. However, the specific use would be for supported housing rather than an unrestricted HMO use. The application is supported by a management plan which provides an argument as to why the applicant considers that the development proposed would not detract from the area's function. Given the details provided, including how tenancies and antisocial behaviour will be managed, security and the local community, and the confirmation of the likely day-to-day operation of the site, it is considered that the change proposed would support and not detract from the area's function. Again, it's considered that the submission has not provided outright confirmation that there is no reasonable prospect of a continuing tourist use, particularly given the short marketing history. So overall, the proposal is therefore contrary to the tourism policies in the local plan and the neighbourhood plan. In terms of the design, visual appearance and heritage, the only proposed external change is the removal of signage, and a supporting statement has confirmed the intention that the front garden area will be maintained. So the proposal is considered to be acceptable visually and from a heritage perspective. In terms of amenity issues, the proposal is considered to provide acceptable accommodation for future occupiers with appropriate communal facilities. So the committee report considers the impact on the amenity of neighbouring occupants and the area and concludes that with the conditioning of the management plan, with the measures outlined within, the proposal satisfactorily addresses amenity concerns that have been raised. The proposal is considered to be acceptable on highways grounds, with suitable cycle storage able to be secured by condition. Issues of ecology are acceptable and the proposal is not BNG liable. In terms of drainage and flood risk, the site is located within flood zone 2 and 3 and a critical drainage area. A site-specific flood risk assessment was submitted and has been assessed as acceptable by the council's drainage engineer. A condition will secure the mitigation measures detailed and ensure that safe refuge for the basement and ground floor occupiers will be retained in line with the officer's comments. So matters relating to waste, designing out crime and low carbon development are all considered to be acceptable and relevant planning conditions are recommended. So the committee report considers all the issues mentioned in depth, and this has weighed up the proposals against the relevant local plan policies noted on this slide. And the relevant neighbourhood plan policies, which is on this next slide, have also been considered in addition to the MPPF and other material considerations. So overall, the proposal is considered to be very finely balanced. However, it is considered that the benefits associated with the proposed development outweigh the loss of the tourist accommodation within the core tourism investment area and the formation of an HMO. As such, the proposal is considered to represent sustainable development, and the officer recommendation is therefore that of conditional approval, subject to the conditions as outlined in the committee report, with the final drafting of conditions delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. In addition to the text on this slide, there is a minor amendment suggested to the wording of Condition 5 to change the two references of YMCA Exeter to City of Exeter YMCA, and this change in wording is because this is the registered name of the organisation and company. So the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. And if members of the Planning Committee are minded to refuse the application against officer recommendation, the final drafting of the reasons should be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency and in consultation with the chairperson. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms Clark, for your very comprehensive report. I'll call on Mr Adam Stewart to address the meeting against the application. Just remind you, Mr Stewart, you have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, councillors. My business is close to the proposal. I'm also representing hotels and guest accommodation providers within the close proximity of this proposal. The Seacroft website states that since taking over the guest house, they have transformed the B&B and updated the facilities and services. All rooms have been refurbished. Seacroft is rated 5 out of 5 on TripAdvisor from 126 reviews and described as being in a perfect position within a minute or two walk of Paignton seafront and harbour. The additional beds that have recently been offered by the new Mercure hotel development are clearly aimed at a different clientele, with rooms at a significantly higher price of guest houses like Seacroft. They offer affordable family accommodation, and the many reviews would seem to support that view. As our tourist industry has declined, former second and third road tourist facilities have previously been allowed to change into HMO or studio accommodation, creating poor quality housing and living environment. We need to protect the remaining facilities within this tourism area. I quote from Torbay's Council's own Destination Management Plan 2022 to 2030. The English Riviera has a strong history of being a premier coastal resort with a tourism sector that supports local and regional businesses, creates local jobs and contributes to the sense of pride. It is time to refresh and reposition the English Riviera as the UK's premier holiday resort of the future. Priority 1 of this plan, visitor accommodation. The management of accommodation, change of use with council planning policies is essential to avoid the risk of a drift towards low-quality visitor accommodation. This includes the provision of temporary, emergency and short-term residential accommodation within the areas of tourism, which could damage the reputation of the destination and create conflict with neighbouring visitor-focused businesses. To allow the change of use from a tourist facility to permanent accommodation in this location would absolutely set a precedent for potential change of future of all tourist accommodation. If we accept the applicant's argument that this guest house is not viable to continue in tourism, how can allowing a change of use to a HMO for social housing help and support the remaining neighbouring businesses? The majority of supporting comments are from people outside of this area or from the owners that stand to gain from the sale of the guest house to YMCA. The committee will be aware that a near identical application at 21 Sands Road was rejected by the committee just last year. There were 3 key reasons for the refusal that directly relate to this application. In summary, reasons 1 and 2, the proposed development results in the loss of tourism facility. It will have a detrimental impact on the setting of the tourism area. It has not been demonstrated that it is not viable to continue in tourism. The loss of tourism facilities can have an adverse impact on the viability of this tourism area, and as such, it is contrary to Policy TO2 and Policy PNP 14 of the Torbay Local Plan. The third reason, the site is in an area defined as within the deprived for overall deprivation and acutely deprived for living environment. The accommodation would be below the space standard set out in Policy DE3, and as such, it's contrary to Policy SS11 of the local plan. Without any change in planning policy, we cannot see any reason that these reasons would not apply to this application. The applicant, YMCA, is a provider of social housing. We fully recognise the need for this type of facility in the Bay and the important work of YMCA in providing accommodation and a service for young vulnerable adults. We understand wherever this facility was proposed, you would likely receive numerous objections, NIMBYs.
One minute left of speaking.
However, in this instance, our objection is solely based on its location and the impact on a clear tourism setting. The need for this facility should not override planning policy set out to protect the Bay's tourist industry. Neighbouring hotels have made significant personal investment on the understanding that the development plans are there to help protect tourism businesses of Torbay. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Stewart. I call on Mr. Gareth Salisbury to address the meeting for the application. As I mentioned to Mr. Stewart, Mr. Salisbury, you have 5 minutes and the clerk will let you know when there's a minute to go.
That's great. Thank you, Chair. So I'm Gareth, one of the Joint Chief Execs at YMCA Exeter. First and foremost, I just want to thank the planning officer, really well represented us there. Wanted to just flag that we talk a lot about HMOs, and one of the key things here was it is not a typical HMO. We're a registered provider. We don't need a HMO license. We're actually providing tailored supported accommodation to young, vulnerable people that need it. This journey started about 18 months ago when Torbay Council were invited by the Department for Levelling Up to apply for this funding, and they needed a delivery partner. They visited our services in Exeter and saw the outstanding work we do over 4 stages of accommodation and picked us as their option to help with young people's housing. We know homelessness in Torbay, as we've already heard from the planning officer, is a big issue. One of the other things that is facing the council is your care leavers. As people move out of care, children move out of care, there is nowhere for them to go. And that's what this project is meant to address. So we are an RP, a registered provider, with 35 years experience of providing supported accommodation in this way in various stages across Exeter. This property represents one of 4 properties in a staged accommodation prospect. So this is the landing place for young people coming out of. We're taking them out of Torquay, out of the foyer, out of all the places where they're blocked at the moment, or out of the children in care system. And this is the place where they start to learn how to be a responsible individual, where they start to learn how to pay their bills, where they start to learn how to get into work. This is it's a tailored support program with staff on site, as we said, between 9 AM till 10 PM at night, and at least 4 staff members on call 24/7, including myself. So why this location? Well, we believe it's ideal. We wanted to, as I say, we wanted to take young people out of where they are already, out of their kind of key relationships in Torbay, in Torquay, to a new place where they've got a bit of a, they've got to play a game. They've got to understand the support that we're offering, and they've got to work through that in order to get to the place where they are back into work. They've been fully supported, and they've got a prospect for the future. Now, one of the biggest issues with this property, as we know, is the risk of the loss of tourism. So this property, Seacroft, is ranked number 77 on TripAdvisor. And the previous speaker's right, there was 126 reviews, all of which are shining. Those 126 reviews are over a 17-year period. So there's nothing wrong with the quality. It has been refurbished. But what the owners have shown us is that over the past 4 years, their revenue has reduced by 42%, down to £13,000 profit this year from £36,000 in 2020, with nothing that they're doing wrong to implement that, to impact that. So I do firmly believe, we firmly believe, that the investment into new hotels on the seafront, we've already got 282 new rooms in those Fragrance Group properties, with another one to come by Easter next year, is having an impact on tourism locally, and it is not a sustainable business to continue going. But I do believe that this project will actually boost tourism. We're bringing local young people, this is Torbay young people that are struggling for housing, kids, children out of care, and providing them the skills and the opportunity to actually be great staff members in these businesses, not just the fragrance group, but the other businesses in the area as well. I think that this will have a real impact on the tourism in Torbay. So ultimately, this project is a benefit to Torbay. It's a partnership with Torbay, and it only benefits young people from Torbay. I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Salisbury. So, committee members, I'm going to invite you for questions to the planning officer. As usual, please may I remind members questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Any members wishing to ask a question? Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. Ms Clark, I wonder if you could help me understand exactly how this committee is meant to determine applications and what our starting point is, and then talk me through what the planning policies that we should be using say specifically in relation to this, please.
Okay, so is that all right? Yeah. So each application has to be determined on its own merits. So you have a starting point of considering sustainable development, and we'd be looking at the relevant material considerations, which particularly in this case is the Torbay local plan, the Paignton neighbourhood plan, and the MPPF. The committee report lists a number of other material considerations which you need to consider. So that's the main sort of starting point when considering an application. So, you know, we do have to consider each application on its own merit and in terms of its supporting details. In terms of the planning policies, is there anything you particularly want me to go through? Obviously, there's quite a number of policies highlighted in the committee report, so I don't know if you just want me to do a brief overview or... Sorry.
Well, my understanding was that members and this committee is required to determine applications based on the policies in the development plan, unless material considerations suggest otherwise. And the key ones pertaining to this on tourism, this does appear to be contrary to, and we're therefore heavily reliant on the material considerations that suggest this is development's okay, notwithstanding the fact it is actually contrary to those policies. Would that be a fair take?
Yeah, so we have to look at the development plan as a whole. So quite often there's policies that pull in different directions. So I think quite strongly in the principle of development section of the committee report, which considers issues like the 5-year housing land supply, issues of affordable housing, the fact that this will be social rented housing, pulls quite strongly in favour of the proposed development. But then you're right, my consideration within the committee report in terms of the tourism policies is that the application is contrary to TO2 in the local plan and PMP 14 in the neighbourhood plan. But it's very much need to weigh it up in balance. Just because an application is necessarily contrary to one or two policies in the neighbourhood plan and the local plan in this instance wouldn't mean that we would just automatically refuse an application. We have to consider how it balances. So hopefully that answers your question.
It does, thank you. But just expanding that one a little bit more, because that's the aspect that I'm trying to seek most understanding with. If this committee reaches a different decision to what it did in June last year in relation to number 21 Sands Road, what we're effectively saying is that the material considerations that apply to this specific scheme are different to the material considerations that applied to that scheme, and therefore there would be a different outcome because both sites are located within similar constraints for tourism, and we've got, in that case, it went one way, and so therefore for this to go another, we'd really be relying that the policy side would still be contrary to this. We'd really be relying on the different material considerations. Is that correct?
So the application at 21 Sands Road, that was for, it was a conversion of a hotel to 10 one-bedroom supported flats in a C2 use. So very much we're looking at the same policies as that application, but there are quite key sort of differences between the two. And that's sort of particularly been extracted in the supporting statements that we've got submitted with this application. So you have to consider all the evidence that we've got relating to homelessness and the fact that the 18 to 24-year-old bracket is is extremely high in terms of Torbay, in terms of its risk of homelessness. So the fact that this sort of covers that age bracket, so it's 18 to 25 in this case, but it covers that. So that's quite a key difference between that and the application number 21. Obviously this is for supported accommodation, but it's down as Sui Generis rather than the C2 use. And there's been quite a lot of detail in terms of the management plan, how it will be operated. One of the recommended conditions, condition 5, I believe, which relates to the proposed use, is that it's benefit people within the Torbay area locally. So that's quite a key material consideration in terms of benefits. And the fact that also restricts it explicitly to the YMCA operation. Because in my view, that all the detail they provided has provided quite a lot of detail in how it benefits the local area and that quite specific need which has been set out. So that maybe is quite a key difference between the application number 21. So although I can see there are sort of fundamental similarities between the two, I do think there are sort of key differences, and as we said before, each application does have to be considered on its own merits.
That was really helpful. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms Clark.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you for that answer. I think it's true to say that the council officers did actually recommend in favour of 21 Sands Road. So your position is not fundamentally different now to what it was before. I was going to ask two follow-up questions to that. One is, has the homeless situation stayed about the same, or would you say deteriorated and got worse since we looked at the other application, I think going back in June? And secondly, are there any comments you want to make on the differences in the management style between the previous 21 Sands Road application and what we're looking at now? Thank you.
Yeah, so I can't give you too much. I'm afraid, the case officer for number 21 Sands Road, so I can't give you too much information about the management. In terms of the homeless situation, how that's changed, perhaps my colleague Tara might be able to assist a little bit.
Would be helpful.
Thank you. So with regards to the level of homelessness in Torbay, there's been no fundamental change. There's still obviously significant pressures within society at the moment. As Verity mentioned, about 15% of our applications in terms of those that require assistance are between 18 and 24 years old. We've seen no change in that over recent months. In previous years, that was higher. It has reduced due to the level of prevention activity that's ongoing, and that has increased with regards to this particular age group. So I would therefore say it's more plateaued, so therefore the requirement for that accommodation and therefore that throughput is very much still required. Just to put it in context, we also, in terms of if you go into the 25 to 30 age group, which is the next bracket up, that represents 26% of our need. So even the young people, in terms of, you say, the 18 to 24, the next age bracket is still significant. The main reason for loss of accommodation overall is loss of accommodation in the private rented sector, but also breakdown in family relationships, which is obviously significant in terms of this age group. So for me, it's not only a preventative in terms of that sort of longer term prevention of homelessness as we sort of people increase, be them 25, 26 as it were. Hopefully that answers your question.
Councillor Paignton. Thank you, Chairman. I'm just wondering whether you could tell us, Verity, in our consideration of the relevant tourism policies applicable in this case, how much, if at all, have you considered those policies against the backdrop of the state of the industry in Torbay today? Have you, and in our deliberation of this, because there's a policy as written down, but there is a state of the industry that probably all councillors are aware of in terms of smaller B&Bs, and I'm just wondering, perhaps actually looking for some guidance as to how much that should be impacting upon our deliberations this evening.
I'll just let my colleague David pick over and policy answer that. Thank you.
Thank you. The most recent evidence base is 2019, which is the evidence base that informed the current destination management plan. And the destination management plan identified, Mr. Stewart correctly identified part of the destination management plan, but the overall picture is that it identified a need for a 2% reduction in serviced accommodation stock. And the Ibis and the Mercure hotels, together with the refurbishment of the Redcliffe Hotel and then the Corbin Head Hotel, will result in probably an increase in something like 350 additional rooms in that area. So the overall direction of travel with tourist accommodation in Torbay is there needs to be a reduction in the number of guest houses and small hotels, but an improvement in the quality of the hotels. And in how that translates into core tourism investment areas, generally there's likely to be a reduction in the area of areas that we would be seeking to protect of core tourism investment areas. So it is a matter of looking to reduce the number but increase the quality. And I don't think that general policy approach will change. Thank you.
Councillor Strang.
Sorry, and understanding the principle that every application is on its own merit, if the committee are minded to approve this application, what's the risk of a precedence being set for future applications which go against the tourism requirements of the neighbourhood plans?
Okay, so I think, as I've said again a couple of times, every application needs to be considered on its own merits. I think this application is quite finely balanced, and from my sort of consideration, I think what's helped is the real detail that they provided in the management plan in terms of how it will operate, which has considered like quite a lot of certainty on that aspect. The planning condition number 5 recommends that the use is restricted to the YMCA and that it's in the Torbay sort of area only. So that's already quite a set list of criteria, which means that weighs quite heavily in the balance, but positively for the actual proposed use. So, and it's obviously very specific to the YMCA's operation. So I think if we were to have other applications that came forward in the nearby area, obviously we would have to consider them again on their own merits, but again they would need to be weighed against the tourism policies, and we would need to consider, do they actually outweigh the negatives? Do the positives outweigh the negatives? So if this application and obviously subsequently the next application that we're going to look at, if they were to be approved, I don't think we would say that it sets a precedent as such, because every application does need to be looked at on its own merits. And it's very much the fact that they've provided or they've detailed quite a set list of criteria, which is, you know, for my recommendation, has sort of tipped it over into the balance, and that's obviously supported by Torbay Council, and we've obviously got the comments from Tara, which has been received, which, you know, strongly indicate that that age bracket is, you know, really highly at risk of homelessness. So I wouldn't say that this would set a precedent for anything in future.
Councillor Billings.
Thanks, Chair. Two further questions. We heard earlier from the speaker on behalf of the YMCA that there was a benefit in locating the intended premises to help the young people that would be occupying the facility in Paignton as opposed to in Torquay, to give them a new start and a new social network to thrive from. I'm just wondering whether officers can explain to me whether within Paignton it has to be this location so close to the seafront, or whether there might be other locations within Paignton that would be suitable for meeting that intended purposes. That was the first question. And then the second question is that having looked at the core tourism area within the local plan, it's relatively tightly defined to the seafront. Having looked at it in relation to the neighbourhood plan, it includes a lot more land further going back away from the seafront. I'm just wondering if officers from a policy perspective could give me an indication if whether there was a proposal to redraw the boundaries, whether it's more likely than not this would be included within some tourism protection policy or not, please. In this site, please. Thank you.
I'll give a go to answering the first of those questions, and I'll probably pass over to David. So you've asked about the benefit in locating in Paignton, other locations they consider to be suitable. To be honest, I haven't had any information that's been submitted with the application to say that they've considered other sites. I know that there are potentially, as the gentleman alluded to in his speech, that they are coming forward with other sites, potentially 2 more, in addition to 39 and 41 within the local area. So I can't sort of tell you if there's any other sort of locations which have been considered or discontinued. Tara may be able to provide a little bit of insight into that, but she may not. But I think we do have to consider the application in front of us on the basis of the information they've submitted and on the basis of its own merits. So I think we very much have to determine the application as submitted. I don't know, Tara, do you have anything you can add to that, or not really?
I think the only thing I have to add with regards to any accommodation, there are some basic criteria that always make it successful or not, in terms of being close to transportation links, you know, outdoor spaces, any of those things that make it a more thriving environment. That would be the only thing that I would have to add, and obviously that location hits both those marks.
Before we carry on, Tara and David, could you introduce who you are specifically in your roles in the council, so that both people in the room and also watching YouTube understand, please?
Certainly, sorry. So I'm Tara Harris. I'm the Divisional Director for Community and Customer Services at Torbay Council. Within that, I also have homelessness services. So that's the housing options team.
Hello, my name is David Pickhaver, and I'm a Principal Policy Planner at Torbay Council, mainly involved with the preparation of the new local plan. Sorry, there was a second question about the future of core tourism areas. I've got the microphone, if I could come in on that. This is obviously a matter for members in terms of it's not within my gift to say that we'll be shrinking the core tourism areas further. But as I said, the destination management plan does indicate that there's an oversupply of serviced accommodation, and the logic of that is to reduce the amount of core tourism areas that covers smaller hotels to focus on the really key core tourism, the shop window seafront areas. It's important to note that the areas that remain still will have a tourism function, but there will be a slightly more relaxed policy about change of use in those areas. The other thing to throw into the equation that we'll need to wrestle with as part of the local plan update is the very significant housing need that Torbay has, and meeting the government's housing targets, which the new government has announced will become mandatory. And we know that there's a very, very limited opportunities for greenfield expansion in Torbay, and we will need to make much better use of the built-up area and brownfield sites, and repurposing existing holiday accommodation it is one option to boost housing numbers. But as I say, those are all matters that will need to be considered in more length through the local plan working party and then taken to council. Thank you.
If members haven't got any other questions, I've got a couple I'd like to raise. There was mention, and that's just been mentioned, about in the destination management plan a 2% reduction in the number of bed stock effectively. But can you give me an idea, Verity, of the percentage of bed stock that's actually already outside our core investment tourism areas? Because my understanding is there's quite a high percentage are outside, and the whole purpose of our core investment tourism areas is to protect our core areas of tourism. So therefore the reduction of the 2% is to come outside of the core tourism areas, not inside. So I'd quite like a feel of the bed stock within our core investment tourism areas, both the local plan and the Paignton neighbourhood plan, to get a feel of how much is actually outside that. That's question one. The second question I have is on the viability of this current B&B. Can you clarify the length of time of trade in a year that was being used for the figures? Be useful. And the third question I have is the locality decision. Were other areas outside the Paignton neighbourhood plan called tourism area actually looked at? Because it seems to me that we're being in an unenviable position here as a planning committee with balancing. It might have been a lot easier if this application had just been outside the area. So I'd like to have a little bit more understanding of the, as the gentleman Salisbury mentioned, about 18 months of discussion beforehand. You know, how did that impact this application?
Just to confirm, so we do set out, I've said this a number of times, we do set out a pathway to a decision. They have gone through the pre-application process. So, you know, this does rely on that multidisciplinary approach. So talks have been going on for a number of months. Verity's been involved with that. There are some questions that you probably answer one of those, but again, I think we possibly have to pass to David and Tara just to sort of get that strategic approach. But it's a multidisciplinary approach, including adult services, children's services, you know, public health. It's a much wider piece of work to get to this point. So rest assured that we have gone through that pre-application process, but we do rely on strategic comments.
David, do you think you can perhaps answer the question on the management plan? I'm just searching in the information in terms of the months of the trading. Are you okay to answer that?
I can't give you an exact number, I'm afraid, other than the amount of accommodation in the local plan core tourism investment area is relatively small in terms of the overall service number of rooms of 15,000 rooms. Obviously, when the local plan was last reviewed in 2015, we made the decision at local plan level to take out all of the back streets in Paignton, and just to keep the esplanade itself in. And the neighbourhood forum chose to have a slightly more extensive area which encompassed more of the smaller hotels and guest houses, such as the ones under consideration today. But the Ibis Styles and the Mercure themselves, combined make up about 280 additional rooms within that very narrow area. So there probably is a net increase in the number of service bed spaces in that narrow area. I'm sorry, I can't give you the exact figures for the overall core tourism areas.
I'm sorry, I'm still searching for the months. I'm afraid it's somewhere buried within the information, which obviously is quite extensive. I think it was probably 3 or 4 months of the year that it's actually trading for. But if you're right to really bear with me, I can keep searching through.
Whilst Councillor Billings asked if you could, Verity, thank you.
Chair, if I may, because this is a question related to what Mr Pickhaver's just said. If we go back to the existing local plan, my understanding of how housing provision was made up is that Torquay, Paignton and Brixton were all given broad quantums that they were meant to meet, and then the location was a decision to be determined by the neighbourhood plans. And I just wonder whether, in relation to the way that we've got the different core tourism areas, whether that was effectively trying to follow a similar approach, whether the local plan emerged in a way that this is the very restricted area along the seafront, which would self-evidently be a core tourism area, and we will effectively then pass over the decision of where the exact boundary of the core tourism area should or shouldn't be to the neighbourhood plan group to fill in more detail, and so having put some basic scaffolding in place, I'm just wondering whether it emerged in that sort of way, or whether alternatively it was more there was a deliberate intent from the council to reduce the core tourism area to simply the area along the seafront. I think that would help, because I think if you could expand a little bit on the answer, Mr Pickhaver, that would really help me, please.
Well, I think that there's 2 core tourism investment areas. There's the local plan core tourism investment area, and then there's the neighbourhood plan core tourism investment area. I think this is a case where the exact boundary of the core tourism investment area is not itself a strategic policy, and it's a matter where the neighbourhood planning is within its rights to adopt a more extensive area than is in the local plan. So the fact that it's not a core tourism investment area in the local plan doesn't mean it isn't a CTI, excuse the jargon, not a CTIA. But I would come back to the issue about the overall housing need in Torbay, which is a bay-wide shortfall, and that has been covered in Ms Clark's comments, so I won't go into that in more detail. But as I say, on a non-strategic matter where a neighbourhood plan is adopted after the local plan, the neighbourhood plan carries more weight on that particular boundary issue.
Thank you, Chair. That was most helpful.
Verity.
Yep, sorry about that. So it trades between May to September. They've confirmed that within their statement about the tourism and the evidence from the owners. They say there's no winter trading, as there's not enough custom during this period.
Thank you. Councillor Verdi.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, you said there's 18 to 24-year-olds and they stay there up to 18 months, maximum 3 years. What kind of percentage of people go on to greatness being in this accommodation? And after 3 years, what happens to those people who have not achieved anything? And also, you mentioned that it designs out crime. Similar accommodation as such, has there been any stats on ASB within areas of such accommodation? And designing out crime, how is that achieved with such accommodation? Thank you.
So I think I'll take the last point, designing out crime. I think they've covered that within their management plan, but it's particularly sort of the CCTV and the presence of staff being on site and on call and dealing with any issues that may arise. In terms of the percentage that go on to greatness, I think that couldn't really be quantifiable from my perspective. I can't tell you what happens in terms of if they don't sort of move on to the next stage, but perhaps Tara would be able to give a little bit of insight into that. I think the main thing is though they're required to take part in that EMOTE programme, and that's part of their lease agreement. So if they're not actually progressing or taking part in that, then I could only assume that they would be dropped from the programme because it wouldn't sort of be moving on successfully. So that's my understanding. I don't know if, Tara, if there's anything extra you can sort of add to that.
Yep, certainly. I think with regards to the ASB element, I think Verity's covered that in terms of the management plan. Also, with regards to nomination agreements, Torbay Council will have control over that. So it's always about looking at the suitability of a young person to move into the accommodation, looking at the overall mix in terms of the number of people in there, the type, how they will interact, as it were. So it is about looking at the facility as a whole rather than just as the individual. With regards to going on to greatness, I think for me the benefit of YMCA is the breadth of experience that they bring as an organisation and as a trusted partner and a well-experienced partner working in Torbay. They have similar facilities in Exeter, so have a lot of experience with regards to that. The whole point of the funding in terms of central government is to say it was by invite, recognising the challenges that we had in Torbay. Not everybody in England was given this opportunity to apply for this funding. Torbay was, pinpointed with regards to the need. The whole point is about giving independence, is about education, it's about providing that pathway to enable people to step onto that next element in their lives and accommodation. The whole point is it's not meant to be their permanent home forever. It is for a period in their life to give them that stability and also that education and support. So in terms of the pathway on, would be very much into private rented sector if they were to stay within Torbay as part of that.
Thank you for that answer. So if someone hasn't moved on, as they should say, after 3 years, where do those people go thereafter?
If I can come back, so, there is a plan, as you say, that is about that engagement. Ultimately, there is the private rented sector, just like anybody else. So it is about sourcing that accommodation in the same way that if anybody's in the foyer or someone approaches the housing options service, it's about working with them and trying to find and work with landlords to provide that accommodation. The whole challenge in Torbay is going to be about affordability. So therefore, about giving people those life skills and getting them into employment to afford that would obviously be a significant stepping stone in terms of facilitating that. But we've also got lots of young people that aren't in that position. So, it is only meant to be a stepping stone, although that stepping stone is for a significant period of time to achieve those outcomes.
And from your experience, how many have gone on to achieve, work or other placements within society?
Can't particularly answer that information for Torbay. This is the first type of scheme that we will have in Torbay of this nature. But obviously, there is something in Exeter. I don't know the success criteria, apart from it's seen as a very good facility, and therefore has been successful in terms of obtaining the government grant funding based on the outcomes that YMCA achieve overall. Without that, then I wouldn't have expected them to have succeeded in terms of that grant funding from central government.
Thank you for that. Just one last point. One of the speakers talked about these people finding work within the vicinity. Would you have any stats on whether they do find work in the vicinity, like in, say, Exeter? And does the YMCA approach businesses within the vicinity to help these people as well?
So I think that's a specific question for YMCA in terms of the output from their facility in Exeter. I don't know if I can add any more to that.
Councillor Fox. Can we keep the questions on material?
Right, in view of the debate we've just been having over the last few minutes, would it be possible for Gareth Soulsby to give us his best estimate from his knowledge on what the situation or the success rate has been in Exeter? I think that might help us.
Yeah, I think because it's related to the management plan and confidence in that, that would be okay. We've got to just be careful we stick to the material considerations of this actual plan in the application. But as long as it's not a war and peace, Mr. Soulsby.
Oh, thank you. So in our stage 2, 3 and 4 accommodation in Exeter, we have a 100% success move-on rate over the past 3 years. So that's moving into their own private rented accommodation or off to university. In terms of into work, our whole stage 4 project, 26 young people, only 2 that are not in full-time employment. They're both in vocational roles at the moment and studying. So we pride ourselves on that. That is what our service is built on. In terms of that step down as well, we've already discussed with other providers like the foyer that if it's not working out at this stage and they need higher support, we can step back into the foyer, work with them at that stage to get them to a place that's ready for this accommodation. So we will never give up on an individual, make sure they're finding the right support where they need it, but we kind of chop and change what we do to make sure that is tailored to them. It's not just one size fits all, if that's helpful.
Thank you, Mr. Soulsby. Members, if you have no specific questions, we'll open this out for debate. Councillor Billings.
Chair, I think this, in terms of the provision of this accommodation, as a principle, I think is absolutely brilliant. And to have the YMCA on board and helping the young people in this way, I think is great, as the numbers that we just heard in terms of the success rate demonstrate. Where I'm struggling most is in relation to this site as to whether it's appropriate. Because whilst the principle is clearly laudable, as we've heard, this specific site is rated 5 out of 5 on TripAdvisor and is number 16 out of 42 guest houses in Paignton, with the description that the existing owner's providing for TripAdvisor, starting, our Paignton bed and breakfast is a perfect position with a minute or 2 walk 100 metres from the seafront. Now, if this proposal is okay in that location, as much need as it is and as fantastic as it is to be working with the YMCA, then clearly guest houses 17 through to 42 must logically also hold that if the YMCA came forward, and we would have similar views. And I just wonder whether members on the committee are really comfortable with this. this is a phenomenal scheme, much needed, as demonstrated by the fact that Torbay was approached as one of the areas from government to spearhead this. It's really, really important we provide this type of accommodation, but I'm very much struggling with this specific location, and it would have the matter before members could have been so much easier if the government funding to provide this accommodation had taken a building that was an eyesore and brought it up to spec and enhanced the urban landscape, and we would have had a very quick meeting, and I'm sure we'd have moved on to the second item by now. I think where I struggle is this particular site, and I would like to see what other members have in their minds. It's clear to me that the Town Country Planning Act requires us to determine applications in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. That the reasons that this committee relied on to refuse a development at the 21 Sands Road a little bit further inland apply equally to this site. It's just that the material considerations in this specific application are perhaps a little bit stronger, and I just struggle. That's where I'm coming from, and I'm interested to see what other members think. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Tolchard.
Thank you, Chair. I think we're all absolutely struggling with this one, and Councillor Billings has encapsulated my feelings absolutely. We all know, sitting on the council, and particularly if we're involved sort of in children's services as well, we know that we need this accommodation, and most importantly for our care leavers and vulnerable care leavers at that. I don't think any of us would argue with that at all. But as Councillor Billings said, it is the absolute, conflicting with that is the impact on our tourism provision. And one of the things that we can pride ourselves on, I suppose, is that variety of tourism provision. We know that we have the marvellous new hotels along the seafront, and they are absolutely beautiful. But they evidently do cater to a different market. And having looked at the site this morning, it was very impressive, and I can imagine, that there is a real market for it. I'm surprised that someone hasn't come along, although I understand that it probably hasn't been marketed for that long. But this is what we are struggling with. It's the social dilemma against what is our lifeblood, and tourism is our lifeblood, and here in the Bay, and we need to provide that kind of accommodation as well. So it is a very difficult one for us, Chair, but Councillor Billings, I think, has described very well the dilemma that we face this afternoon, and I'm sorry it is so difficult, and particularly for everyone attending this afternoon. Thank you.
Councillor Verdi.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I'd like to echo what Councillor Tolchard and Councillor Billings have said. I am extremely struggling to reconcile the site with a much needed accommodation. Plus, I can never understand why these schemes always smack bang in the middle of a business district or tourism district. That is something I can't reconcile as well. And I'm 100% sure there are other places that can be converted into accommodation for this, for the YMCA. it is a big struggle and I'm finding it difficult.
Councillor Paignton.
Thank you, Chairman. I mean, just to throw in there kind of another dimension that I'd like to hear members consider. In the course of the questioning, we heard quite a lot about, for want of a better expression, the developer and their credentials are obviously, known, absolutely. But for me, that's bad form as a planning committee because we're talking about a change of use, and that means a future occupant might be someone else. So to weigh so much on the immediate occupier, I think it's potentially bad form because it'd be like if we were looking, indeed, as we have looked at other planning applications, when arguments about how, maybe mobility issues would be important to that would-be developer, we'd be asked to discount that because we have to think about the property going forward much further into the future, perhaps after we're planning committee members. So if members were minded, I'd ask them to consider that as well, not weigh so much on the very good credentials of the would-be developer. And I also feel we're slightly kind of straying on to not considering what's on the table because, yeah, it's, we can all think of more than a dozen sites across the bay where you just wish they'd come on in and do something like this, and we'd be unanimous in our support of it. But that's not the case. We do have to consider what's on the table there. So I'm still undecided, so I'll stop there, but I look forward to hearing what others have to say.
Councillor Fox.
I think what everybody's said has been very helpful and has contributed helpfully to the debate. I do believe that we have to consider what's before us and not what we'd like to consider elsewhere in the context of two big things, and one is tourism and the other one is the housing situation in Torbay. And as Mr. Pickhaver has said and others, we have a pressing need for homes in Torbay. And this need isn't going away, it's getting worse. And I think it's very well put in the officer report on page 27, where halfway down there, it talks about the pressing need for homes. It talks about the number on the waiting list of 1,600. It talks about the really low, small amounts of housing we have in reserve in Torbay. These are absolutely critical things that we have to consider. And it's really important that we get to grips with these. And that's why I think the government invited us, and not all councils, to put forward this scheme. I agree it would be nice to know what comes out of the end of it, which is what Razis was saying. But I think we've got to consider what the basis of the need that's there before us and then hope that the management does its job. In relation to tourism, I mean, nobody wants to knock Torbay's tourism. We're all batting for Torbay. We think it's really important that we have a great tourism product here. I would just say that, again, on page 36 of the officer report, it does hint at what, again, Mr. Pickhaver was saying, that we have this decline overall. And whilst that's going in one direction, we've had the Mercure, and we've had Ibis, and we've got others coming which are pushing through the other way. And we are going to get into a surplus. And again, it's a very difficult balance. And I think we're all, possibly all of us have got a foot in both camps on this because we all see the need. And Anatole Chard has eloquently explained how important it is in relation to the difficulties of placements of young people who are in genuine stress. And Anna probably knows more about that than I know. But we've got to, I think, somehow just look at the site before us. And does this site cross the line on its own? Or is it a bad site for what is undeniably a really important need in Torbay? Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to return to a point that Councillor Paignton raised. Councillor, one of the things that I was struck by in some of the suggested conditions was condition 5B, which was that the premises would only be operated by the YMCA Exeter for approved use, although I think Ms Clark's suggested earlier that the name's subtly different to that on the final version. So in other words, this is a personal consent to that particular applicant, which means, for me, I think it was very relevant to talk about that applicant's credentials, which are first class by any reckoning. But you raise a very interesting point, and that is, let's assume some years into the future, the YMCA has been operating this facility extremely well, and for whatever reason they want to relocate, they want to focus on Exeter, or they want to pull out of Torbay. I think it'd be very hard for this committee, when faced with a future application, to not grant a similar consent for a new applicant to vary that condition. I think we would struggle, and I think relying on the fantastic work that the YMCA is putting forward now for this application would be a problem if we got another application in the future by a different applicant. It's not, to me, that's not in the forefront of my mind, though. I think I really do struggle with how we've ended up with this particular site, because if we take the view that the local plan that we previously have was trying to put the basic skeleton in place, if you like, the backbone to lots of things, as I understood it did on housing, and therefore I believe it probably did on the core tourism area. This particular site is just the other side of the road. If you were going to include any other houses, this would be the dwellings or buildings. This would be the natural next one to include. The boundary is literally next door to it, just on the opposite side of the road going towards the sea. It's probably 12 feet away from the curtilage of this property, and yet the neighbourhood plan included this property and an awfully large number of other properties further up the road going 100, 200 metres. And so therefore, if we were to as a council take the view that we wanted to reduce the size of our core tourism areas from the most recently approved plan, which is the neighbourhood plan, to me, I think it quite likely that we would still have this site within the core tourism area. And Chair, your line of questioning, where is there the opportunity to take away tourism stock outside of the core tourism area? I'm just thinking in my own ward, there are guest houses and B&Bs there that are outside of a core tourism area. I really struggle how this committee, if we were to allow this site, would turn round and strongly refuse another one by another operator where perhaps the material considerations weren't as robust. And even if we did, whether we would find this being used against us at an appeal. And to me, I think that there's very strong reasons why we have these core tourism areas. And I'm considering this as ultimately funding that came to Torbay and that we've been involved in pursuing with the YMCA. It's disappointing we're at this situation, and I'm struggling.
Thank you very much, Councillor Billings. I think I'll just add a few thoughts myself. As Councillor Tolshard said, tourism is the lifeblood of Torbay. Yeah, it is the number one. It is our biggest sector. It supports 10,000 jobs, over 2,500 businesses. And there's reasons we have core investment tourism areas and neighbourhoods to protect. We need to bring in 4 million visitors a year to sustain those businesses. And they're not going to be just in this core tourism area, but they'll be elsewhere. So I am absolutely struggling here, but I think the damage to tourism has been a bit underweighted. I was mindful of what Mr. Stewart said about his business and other businesses in the area, which should be B&Bs, not hotels. The Ibis is a hotel. B&Bs are a very different marketplace. And we have to be mindful if they're saying this could damage us. We don't want to damage our tourism areas. So I think there's a bit more weight on the tourism side that's not factored in. But over to you, Councillor Paignton.
Thank you. I think this kind of, the trickiness of this application is very much why we exist as a committee and we have to reach a decision, unfortunately, as it feels right now. I'd be trying to take a step back and imagine what the kind of average man on the Clapham omnibus would think right now, because we're talking about conserving a certain type of tourism, which I think a lot of reasonable observers would say, things are changing in Torbay. The configuration of our offer is changing, and I remember before before Fragrance started developing what it was, we were well below the national average in terms of branded hotels, and in fact there was some evidence to suggest that people who host conferences and other big organisations were slightly reluctant to host in Torbay for that very reason, that we were well below the national average on branded hotels. So I think there is a reconfiguration, and perhaps I know we're not supposed to wear our ward councillor hats in this committee, but perhaps I'm slightly biased because my ward of Tomorin, which we're sat in now, we have so many properties that yesteryear were once thriving B&Bs, but now some are very run down indeed, some are barely operating, some aren't operating at all. And in fact, elsewhere, this council is working to take in properties and do something good with them, which sees them depart from their hotel and tourism offer. So by taking that point of view, I am kind of leaning, because as Councillor Fox said, we know the other issues are very real and pronounced and right in front of us, and we all wish that we had something on our table right now that was, taking one of those aforementioned properties that perhaps is not operating, but the fact is this is what we've got in front of us, and how would we feel in the future if this site or a site like this or comparable application where that then becomes one of the kind of sites I described in Torbay that we hadn't used, where we actually could have used towards addressing issues around homelessness and increasing the social housing stock. So that's where I'm heading to in my head now, giving it thought. But I'm certainly not yet in a position to propose anything, but to just share with members that's where I am at this point.
Well, committee, we have to be mindful of time. We're now an hour in, and we have 3 more to cover. So at some stage, I'm going to have to ask for a proposal and a seconder. So this could be it, unless Councillor Strang, you have.
I'm incredibly mindful of the need for all the housing, but I'm also very mindful of the core tourism area, which obviously was voted on by our residents and is very important to our residents. I think that the loss of this type of accommodation in that core tourism area is probably, for me, a tipping point. And I think we should probably support the fact that we do still need that type of accommodation in that area. And on that basis, I'd like to propose that we turn down this application.
Thank you, Councillor Strang. To do that, we'd have to have a seconder. Councillor Billings.
Chair, I'd be happy to, for the purpose of moving on, to second that, and I was going to assist Councillor Strang with some reasons that I'd considered, if that would assist, Councillor. So, totally taking on board the fundamental importance of this type of accommodation, but recognising my distinct struggle with this particular site, the reasons that I would highlight would be largely those that we applied previously for the refusal of 21 Sands Road, and that would be and I'll read out, Chair, that the proposed development results in the loss of a tourism facility which will have a detrimental impact on the setting of the tourism area, and it's not been demonstrated that it's not viable to continue in tourism, where the loss of tourism facilities can have an adverse impact on the viability of this tourism area. As such, it's contrary to policy TO2 of the Torbay local plan. That'd be my first reason. That the proposed development results in a loss of a tourism facility on a site where it's not been demonstrated that it's not viable to continue in tourism, where the loss of tourism facilities will have an adverse impact on, rather than support, the viability and function of this tourism area. As such, it's contrary to policy PNP 14 of the Paignton neighbourhood plan. And then 3, that the site is in an area defined as within the deprivation for that the site is in an area defined as within the deprived for overall deprivation and acutely deprived for living environment. The proposal would result in the loss of an existing hotel and change to units, some of which would be below the space standards as set out in a policy DE3 of the local plan, and as a result it would not contribute to improving the sustainability of existing and new communities within Torbay, or contribute to closing the gap between the most and least deprived neighbourhoods. The proposal would add to the concentration of the living environment of being deprived in the area, and would fail to create cohesive communities with a high quality built and natural environment. As such, it would be contrary to policy SS11. Now, I'd be interested in officers' views on the robustness of that third reason. I personally think points 1 and 2 stand, but before we go to a vote, I'd be interested in officers' views, Chair, on that third reason, recognising the type of use and how it's somewhat different from what 21 Sands Road was proposed for. Thank you, Chair.
I think I'd just be cautious, particularly mentioning the space standards and policy D3, because that really does relate explicitly to self-contained units, which goes by bedroom number and sort of how many floors that covers. So to my mind, an HMO doesn't really have any relevance to those explicit space standards. So I would really caution against mentioning policy D3. I don't know if, Jim, you want to add anything to that?
No, nothing more from me, just complete clarity that those are actually the two you want to replicate, and there's no other reasons that you want it while you have the floor.
So just on that third reason then, the reference to DE3 we think is inappropriate, but the reference to policy SS11, the general point about deprivation and the concentration of relatively dense units within an already deprived ward, are officers' views that would be inappropriate as a reason?
I think you're giving clear guidance in the report around what Verity's just outlined, so we've been quite clear on space standards, nationally prescribed space standards.
Well, then in that instance, then, Chair, I think I'd really highlight those first two reasons, the TO2 of the Torbay local plan and the PNP 14 of the Paignton neighbourhood plan. My reasons 1 and 2.
Thank you. So we have a proposal on the table for refusal. 2 reasons why.
Chair, can I just come in? So, Councillor Strang, you were the original proposer. Are you happy with those reasons?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. Confirmation.
Thank you very much, Lisa. So we have a proposal on the table for refusal and 2 reasons why. And we'll go to the vote. All those in favour of the proposal of refusal, raise your hands.
So that's 4 for refusal.
Those against?
And 2. And 2.
And those abstain?
And that's 1 abstain.
So the proposal is passed. Thank you. Refusal is, yeah, I know that. The refusal proposal is passed. Thank you. Thank you. Well, moving on to item 6, which is to consider an application for 39 Sands Road, Paignton, application P/2024/0374. The clerk has confirmed there are 2 registered speakers for the item. I'll now call upon Verity to introduce the application. Thank you.
Thank you. So the application site is 39 Sands Road, which is a semi-detached property in use as 8 holiday apartments with owners' accommodation known as Hollylets apartments. The self-attained accommodation is spread over 4 floors and is restricted to owners' accommodation associated with the holiday use and occupancy of the holiday units to between the 15th of March and the 15th of January only by a formal planning application. So this is an aerial photo of the site in terms of designation. As with number 41, the site's located within a community investment area and is within the Paignton Neighbourhood Plan Core Tourism Investment Area, but is outside of the local plan Core Tourism Investment Area allocation. The site's located in flood zone 2 and 3 and a critical drainage area. The Roundham and Paignton Harbour Conservation Area is located to the south of the site, with the boundary starting in the middle of Sands Road. So, as an update to members, since the writing of the committee report, 1 additional letter of objection has been received. However, no new material planning considerations have been raised. So this plan shows the existing site layout. You can see the site benefits from a driveway for 7 cars with vehicular access points onto Sands Road. And there are 2 separate patio garden areas. So this next plan shows the existing basement and ground floor plans. So the basement features 1 holiday flat, whilst the ground floor features 3 holiday flats and owner's accommodation at the rear listed as flat number 9. The plan now showing is the existing 1st and 2nd floors. So at 1st floor level there are 3 holiday flats and a storage room alongside the bedroom area of the owner's accommodation. At 2nd floor level is 1 holiday flat. So this plan details the proposed basement and ground floor plan. So permission is sought for the change of use of the building from holiday apartments to temporary supported accommodation for the YMCA, which is a Sui Generis use. The application has come forward in conjunction with application P/2024/0529 for the attached semi-detached property 41 Sands Road, which we've just looked at. So the proposal will result in 5 self-contained units of accommodation, which feature kitchens, living rooms, bathrooms and bedrooms. So these are flats 1, 4, 7, 8 and 9. So there's 3 cluster bedrooms which are proposed for use in conjunction with the proposed facilities at number 41 Sands Road, which feature a bedroom and bathroom. And these are listed as flats 2, 5 and 6, alongside 1 night stop crash pad room, which is flat number 3. So the proposal also features a communal laundry room for all the units and a cluster kitchen for flats numbers 2, 5 and 6. The basement level will feature 1 self-contained flat. At ground floor level there will be 2 self-contained flats, 1 cluster bedroom and the night stop crash pad provision and the shared laundry room. So this is the proposed 1st and 2nd floor plan. So at 1st floor level there will be 1 self-contained flat, 2 cluster bedrooms and the kitchens for use by the cluster flats. At 2nd floor level there will be 1 self-contained flat. No external changes are proposed to the building, however it's been confirmed that signage relating to the holiday use will be removed. The vehicular access will be unchanged and will continue to be via Sands Road. As with number 41, which we've just looked at, the property will be run by the YMCA Exeter, which is a registered provider, as affordable housing let at social rents and operates as supported accommodation for young people aged between 18 to 25, with a direct connection locally to Torbay. 9 single occupancy supported flats with a mixture of accommodation types will be provided, and occupants will receive support and participate in the Emote programme. On-site staffing will be shared between the application site and the adjacent number 41, with staff present between 9 a.m. to 10 p.m, after which staffing provision remains on call. So this photo is taken of the front of the site from Sands Road, where you can see the existing front parking area. This image is taken from Google Street View in 2022 and shows the frontage of the property from Sands Road, just in a bit more context. So this slide lists the key material considerations, which are considered in detail in the committee report. So in terms of the principal development, housing and affordable housing, the committee report goes into significant detail on these issues, and I covered the majority of these issues in detail within the presentation for number 41, so I won't look to repeat the same benefits, but I will highlight the differences. So the council cannot demonstrate a 5-year housing land supply, and the tilted balance in favour of sustainable development is therefore engaged. The formation of the proposed supported accommodation is considered to carry moderate weight given the number of units proposed. So the proposal would create 9 units of a mixture of types which would constitute affordable housing, which is let at social rents and operated as supported accommodation for young people aged between 18 to 25 with the direct connection locally to Torbay. The proposal, like number 41, is via grant funding by the SHAP initiative, and placements at the accommodation will be undertaken in partnership with the council, enabling full control over the allocations with restrictions for local residents. The management plan is the same as put forward for number 41 and provides certainty about the proposed use, client group and operations of the site. This accommodation type is designed as Stage 2 move-on accommodation, which provides a stepping stone for residents through the 4 stages of the YMCA pathway of supported accommodation. So overall, the proposal will result in affordable housing let at social rents and operated as supported accommodation, which targets a key demographic with a high proportion of households per 1,000 assessed as homeless. The principle of the development is considered to accord with policies SS11, SS13, H1, H4 and H6 of the Torbay local plan. So moving on to tourism issues, as you were aware, the site is not within the core tourism investment area allocation of the local plan, but is allocated as such within the Paignton neighbourhood plan. 39 Sands Road is very well located for tourism, within easy walk of the beach, Paignton Harbour and a range of other attractions. Despite the excellent location, the existing holiday apartments are very small and likely offer a level of tourist accommodation that was previously acceptable but fall short of today's standards. Online reviews on TripAdvisor appear to indicate the property has been used as holiday accommodation known as Holylets, with the last review dated June 2022 giving a 1-star rating. The application submission confirms that 39 Sands Road was first marketed for sale on the 18th of January 2023 until the YMCA offer was accepted in February 2024. There are a total of 11 viewings, including the YMCA's, and the majority of these were investors outside of the area looking to buy properties and convert them into alternative uses. On that basis of the quality of the accommodation, it's considered that the loss of the holiday apartments would not detract from the range of facilities available in Torbay. Sands Road features a mixture of residential and holiday accommodation, and the change of use of the property to supported accommodation is not considered to undermine the holiday character of the area. The proposed use is also considered to bring about benefits that outweigh the loss of the holiday accommodation facilities, and the proposal is therefore considered to accord with policy TO2 of the local plan. When considering the proposal against policy PN14 of the neighbourhood plan, the proposal is considered to accord with all points, with the exception of the requirement that it has been evidenced that there is no reasonable prospect of continuing use for tourism purposes. Given the quality of the accommodation alongside the marketing length, it is reasonable to consider that it is unlikely that there is a reasonable prospect of the site being used for tourism in the future, although the evidence and commentary provided is not considered to provide outright confirmation that there is no reasonable prospect of continuing tourism use. The proposal therefore fails to accord with policy PMP 14 on that basis. In terms of the design, visual appearance and heritage, the only proposed external changes is the removal of the signage, and it's considered to be acceptable visually and from a heritage perspective. In terms of amenity issues, the proposal is considered to provide acceptable accommodation for future occupiers. Each self-contained unit will have its own kitchen, living room, bedroom and bathroom facilities, with some units featuring combination rooms. With regard to the floor areas of the self-contained units, each unit is for one person. Under the nationally described space standards, the floor area should be 37 square metres for a one-bedroom flat. However, the nature of this proposed use is different from fully independent living, and the management plan provides further confirmation on the intended use, which is considered to be reasonable. Cluster flats will have access to the shared facilities in number 41, alongside the shared kitchen within the building. It is considered reasonable to suggest the addition of a planning condition requiring the maximum length of stay for all the flats, with the exclusion of flat 3, to a maximum length of 3 years, given the accommodation is designed as temporary accommodation and would not be suitable for indefinite permanent occupation, given the size of the accommodation and the management arrangements. Given the need for access to the shared facilities, the application site and the use of number 41 proposed via the concurrent application are intrinsically linked. As such, it is recommended that a Section 106 legal agreement is secured to link the two facilities at 39 and 41, as 39 cannot provide a good quality level of accommodation with the level of communal facilities located solely in number 39. Flat 3 is a night stop crash pad room which features one window with obscure glazing and views focused towards the adjacent building. This room will be used for a maximum of 3 weeks for assessment procedure. So the room is not considered to be appropriate as a cluster bedroom given the limited outlook, and therefore a condition is recommended to ensure the occupancy of the room by an individual for no longer than 3 weeks. The committee report considers the impact on the amenity of neighbouring occupants, and the area includes that with the conditioning of the management plan, the measures outlined within, the proposal satisfactorily addresses amenity concerns that have been raised. The proposal is considered to be acceptable on highways grounds, with suitable cycle storage able to be secured by condition. Issues of ecology are acceptable, and the proposal is not BNG liable. In terms of drainage and flood risk, a site is located in flood zone 2 and 3 and a critical drainage area. A site-specific flood risk assessment was submitted and has been assessed as acceptable by the council's drainage engineer, which can be secured by condition. So matters relating to waste, designing out crime and low carbon development are all considered acceptable, and relevant planning conditions are recommended. So the committee report considers all the issues mentioned in depth, and this has weighed up the proposal against the relevant local plan policies noted on this slide. The relevant neighbourhood plan policies on this slide have also been considered, in addition to the MPPF and other material considerations. So overall, the proposal is considered to be finely balanced. However, the officer recommendation detailed within the committee report was that the benefits associated with the proposed development outweigh the loss of the tourist accommodation within the core tourism investment area. As such, the proposal was considered to represent sustainable development, and the officer recommendation was that of conditional approval, subject to the wording on this slide. However, as the application at number 41 has just been refused by the planning committee, given this application is intrinsically linked to number 41, given the need for the use of the shared facilities located within number 41, I would alter my officer recommendation to that of refusal on the basis of the reason for refusals just listed for number 41 relating to the loss of the tourism facility, but I'd also add a reason for refusal which states that the facilities provided within the building are of an insufficient size and quality to support the intended occupiers, and therefore a poor quality residential environment would be created. Thank you.
Got it. Thank you very much, Ms Clark. I'll call on Mr Adam Stewart again to address the meeting against this application. Reminder, if you have 5 minutes, when we have 1 minute left, you'll be told accordingly.
Thank you, Chair. My statement is largely similar to the previous statement, obviously. So I will just quickly read through a few key differences. So Holylet's website highlights that the property is situated 100 yards from Paignton seafront, beach and pier. TripAdvisor were accepting bookings there in 2022. It's recently been put on the market, and the agents describe Holylet's as a successfully run business, well furnished and well equipped, currently trading with 9 holiday lets. We feel that with the right amount of investment, a holiday lettings business in this front-like location should succeed without the need for change of use. I think there's probably been a lack of investment by the current owner, and therefore, I don't think it's right then to come for change of use because of that lack of investment. Again, we're looking at the Torbay Council's destination management plan with the provision of temporary and emergency short-term accommodation could damage the reputation of the destination and create conflict with neighbouring visitor-focused businesses. And then again, the 3 key reasons that the 21 Sands Road was refused. Again, there's no point in me reading all those out again. With regards to the policy D3 and the lack of space standards, I think there's 3-4 of the units there that are some are below actually half the prescribed recommended standards. I also think that I'm just reading through here. I'm sorry. Yeah. Just want to make sure I'm not repeating what was in the last one. Yeah, the conversion would then be required. Sorry, I'll read that bit. Any application seeking permission for a change of use should reconfigure the internal layout to provide the suitable space standards set out in policy DE3 of the local plan. The conversion would then be required to adhere to the building regulations for fire and sound insulation. The application would then be subject to a 106 agreement that could be used to improve the living environment in this area defined as the most deprived decile. I actually don't feel comfortable standing here being the only one kind of speaking out to object against such a proposal. I think Mr Salisbury put his case forward for YMCA very eloquently, and I think Tara as well, explaining about the absolute need for these kind of facilities in the Bay. And you can see the fact that the committee spent an hour debating that, and it was a very delicate balance, and I think probably people were not comfortable. You got your head in your heart, but clearly my objection is to the location, the 100 metres from the seafront, and its closeness to the core investment area, and that's the only thing. And I hope Mr Salisbury is back putting his case forward for his YMCA in a different location. I think it's very good that we've got funding from outside of the Bay for the Bay for this facility. And again, I'm repeating this, that it's purely down to location. I also want to add that the hotels mention that the very much review-led, so it only needs 1 or 2 poor reviews, and then that can put people off even booking, knowing that this facility is in close proximity, rightly or wrongly. But we all look through reviews, and this could put people off, and then other hotels in the neighbourhood get brought down for that reason. Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr Stewart. Call on Mr Sui Generis to address the meeting for the application. Again, you have 5 minutes, Mr Johns, and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute left.
Thanks very much. I don't know if you've ever been to the Great Western Hotel in Taunton. That's a great hotel. It's actually run by homeless people in apprenticeships. Has fantastic reviews, and it certainly doesn't put anyone off going to stay there. Obviously a little bit upset after that decision on 41, and there's been a lot of discussion, but I would like to address a few issues and misconceptions that appear to be in the room. First off, who we are is important. It's not just the fact that we're really good at what we do, and I don't apologise for that. YMCA is excellent at what we do. If you go back over the last 30 or so years, you will find our support frameworks in the best practice across the country. And not when I say ours, I don't just mean YMCA England. I mean YMCA Exeter. I've been involved in YMCA Exeter for 23 years. Before that, I was a social worker. I've got quite a lot of experience in doing this kind of work. And Gareth's talked about the last sort of 3 years worth of success rates. 100% success rate in supported accommodation of moving people forward is not normal. It's not normal by long standards. It's absolutely abnormal. It's almost supernatural. But we're a registered provider. We are a housing association. We provide social housing, and if you accept Homes England grant to build developments, and we're not a developer, we don't make any money, we're a not-profit, then that accommodation has to be kept to social housing in perpetuity. It can't be changed. If I want to sell it or move on, and you know, there are a huge amount of hoops I have to jump through, including coming to you for permission as a Torbay council, including passing it across to another registered provider, and of course, most importantly, all the money that comes from the capital grant that was there to develop that property has to be paid back. So there's more than a few hurdles, and we have absolutely no intention of going anywhere. We've been in Devon for 180 years. Your YMCA in South Devon has been a huge part of Torbay for a very long period of time, and we work in partnership with them. Grant funding, I just kind of need to come on to that because, again, yes, the SHAP funding has paid towards these developments, but there's a few things you need to understand about Homes England funding. Many of you will probably, hopefully, know that already. First off, Homes England funding doesn't pay for all of the capital development. The government didn't wander in here and say, yep, here's 100% of all you need to buy that property and develop it into supported accommodation. The grant that they give us is barely half. Torbay Council has no money whatsoever, and so they haven't contributed anything because they're not able to towards this development. So the YMCA have covered all of the rest of that costs. Again, another example why we are very committed to Torbay and this development. It leads on to that grant funding in terms of the timescale. SHAP was a very short timescale. It started in January and it ended in October. It's a very short amount of time to find and get all the things that you need to do development. In terms of why have we picked this location? Well, in many senses, beggars can't be choosers. There are a small amount of accommodation that we can afford to develop and where we could find it. We started off actually with this property, 39 Sands Road, and 41 was just an ideal way of making 39 work, hence the need to link the two that the planning officers made. By turning down 41, we are kind of destining the entire bid to fail, which is kind of where I move on to next. And this isn't to strong arm at all, but whilst that funding is only 50%, that funding is very, very time limited. If we don't get this planning permission to do this development, YMCA won't be coming back to you to say, oh, we found another hotel further up, a little bit further away from the sea. All that money will go back to central government, and this project will not go ahead. So I think it's really important to do that. My last comment was that you've said a few times now that lifeblood, the lifeblood of Torbay is tourism. You know, well, I really hope not. Actually, I think, do you know what? The lifeblood of Torbay is the people that live here. And the people that we are talking about are people that live here. They're
1
here
minute
already.
left of speaking.
They live in Torbay, they live in Paignton. What you're actually talking about is that your income is, you know, from tourism. And I totally understand that. You're right. You might want to speak to Tara about how much money you right now spend on temporary accommodation and accommodation for homeless people. Because that far outweighs the loss that you'll get from tourism from making a decision on one guest house or even two in Paignton. Far outweighs it. Thanks for listening.
Thank you very much, Ms. Syce-Johns. So, committee members, I invite questions to the planning officer. Councillor Tolshards.
Thank you, Chair. Can we just be clear on the situation with number 39? I think when we went to look at both properties this morning, it was sort of made clear to us that the viability of 39 relied very much on 41 and the sort of shared space that was available there. So could you just clarify that for us, Ms. Clark, please?
Yeah, I think my recommendation was very much that the two needed to be linked because, in my opinion, there wasn't sufficient space for those living in the proposed cluster flats. If you just take number 39 in isolation, the people in the cluster flats won't actually have very much space for actual living. They've got a small sort of shared kitchen, but that would be it. So the committee here would need to consider if that would be acceptable accommodation by itself in isolation. My recommendation would be probably not. I don't think it would be.
Councillor Verdi.
I just wanted some clarification on the section 106 again, the tying in and the reliance of 39 onto 41. Now a parasite needs a host. How can this one live without the host? Is there any point in continuing?
So that would be why I changed my recommendation at the end. Rather than just reading out what was on the screen, my recommendation was changed to that of refusal because my opinion is that the facilities based on that site alone, number 39, are not acceptable from my point of view. Obviously the committee may take a different view, but my view was that they needed to be linked so that the occupants in number 39 in this site could use the spaces available to them within 41. So obviously that's something that you all as members will need to consider, but my recommendation would be that it's not sufficient to be a standalone accommodation.
Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. Ms Clark, can you talk me through the financial justification that we've had for this proposal versus the one that the committee previously considered? You talked earlier about, in relation to the other application, how you got declining profits over a period, which went some way to evidencing a financial rationale for saying it wasn't viable, although in your view it wasn't sufficient in that case. What have you had for this specific application, please, for this site, and how far has that gone, please?
We need to be careful asking questions about details that are already in the report. So you're asking Verity to just reaffirm that all the officer reports are incredibly detailed, and as Verity finished off with that officer recommendation, that unfortunately it's a recommendation of refusal for those reasons there, because it's completely interlinked, and that's section 106. So the debate is, the questioning should be around that really, rather than repeating details in the officer report. Sorry.
Councillor Pentley.
Chairman, with all due respect to all members, is there any foreseeable world, given the previous item and how that concluded, we would be in a position to pass this? So can we move to debate stage now, please?
Yeah. Yes, I agree. We'll move to debate stage, councillors. Councillor Pentley.
Again, for exactly the same reasons, I suggest the movers and the seconders of the previous motion on the previous application might be minded to do so again, given there's nothing that can change the outcome for us, is mine. I think, unless someone's got something remarkable they can say to it. So I'd invite them to come forward now.
Councillor Strang.
In view of those comments, I'll propose that we refuse this application based on the aforementioned link to the previous application and under the same conditions.
I think, Councillor Strang, I think I'd use reasons 1 and 2 that we used previously, and I'd use the third reason that the officer referred to. If that would be my suggestion, I'll let you, as a chair, confirm that that's Councillor Strang's view.
Is that your view, Councillor Strang?
It is.
Complete clarity on the third reason then, please.
So, Ms Clark, could you read out what you referred to as that third reason, please?
Sure. So I said that the last reason for refusal would state that the facilities provided within the building are of an insufficient size and quality to support the intended occupiers, and therefore a poor quality of residential environment would be created. So that would be contrary to policy D3 of the local plan.
Is that okay? Yep.
Yes.
Yes, Chair.
Thank you. So the voting now on refusal and the reasons why, the two conditions and the last one plus the extra third one. All those in favour?
Okay, so that's 4-4.
All those against? All those abstain?
Okay, but I've got 3 abstain and 0 against.
I'm just going to call 5-minute adjourn, stretch your legs, and then we'll reconvene at 22. Thank you. So welcome back to the committee meeting. We're going to now move into item 7, which is to consider an application for Brends Orchard, land adjacent to Edginswell Farmhouse, Edginswell Lane, P/2023/0172. The clerk has confirmed that there are 2 registered speakers for this item. I will now ask Sean Davies to introduce the application.
Thank you. So the site's called Brends Orchard, shown by the red line here. The proposal is for 5 houses. So the site itself is here. It's just north of Edginswell listed farm buildings, which are here, and it's just south of a fairly modern development called Edginswell Orchard, comprising 4 houses and garage buildings. This is Edginswell Lane, where the site would be accessed from. There are Grade 2 listed buildings at Press Barns here. This is a small commercial business called P&P Lifts. The site itself is here. So we've got Edginswell Lane and a future extension to the National Cycle Network, shown by the orange dots. The pink shading shows the future growth area that the site is within, countryside area in green. There's a nearby site that's important for local wildlife here, and the blue dots show a flood risk area. The site is not in that area. If this is approved, the recommendation for this one is refusal. But if councillors vote to approve the site, then a bridleway will be provided through it to connect up to the housing for the future growth area. So the site again is here. We've got Edginswell Orchard and listed buildings shown in blue, so Press Barns, Edginswell Farm, and Edginswell Hall is fairly close to the site. The site's covered by, which again is here, the site's covered by an area-wide tree protection order that was introduced in 2021. This area is an earlier tree protection order from 1970. This shows the site as it was from Google Earth in 2017. These slides are really just for context. At that point in time, the site was covered with trees. This is the boundary wall to the site along Edginswell Lane. At that point from 2016, photos from 2016. At that point in time, as I understand it, there was a small entrance into the site. This is just another contextual photo from 2021, again showing the wall along the front of the site. The site's changed a bit over time. The trees have been removed. That was done, as I understand it, before the tree protection order came into force, and so no planning permission was needed for that. Edginswell Farm here, just again for context, Edginswell Orchard to the north. There's now a section of wall has been removed, and you can see that here, and from the other direction, from there. So this is the proposed site plan. The proposal is for, as I mentioned, 5 units. So we've got units 1, 2 and 3 here, and units 4 and 5 here. Units 1 to 3 have been designed to form a barn structure. Units 4 and 5 have been designed to form a farmhouse structure. And that's, as I understand it, the design has followed on from the buildings at Edginswell Farm. There's an orchard proposed here. This is a bin store. And these are small planters outside of each unit. This would all be hard standing, and this would be the entrance through the site to the bridleway. Lighting columns are proposed here and here, so that if the application is approved, the road can be adopted. This is a drawing of the access to the site. Visibility displays have been shown to be possible. The applicant carried out a speed survey, and the results of that showed that traffic in both directions was roughly 23 miles an hour, which has enabled highways to agree to lower visibility displays than they would otherwise be able. The access into the site would have a gradient of about 5%, which is below the 8% limit for highways, and so that's acceptable. If the application is approved, the applicant has agreed a pre-commencement condition to install double yellow lines along this side of Edginswell Lane to prevent vehicles from parking there, so that they don't obstruct the visibility display. So this is a street scene drawing. The actual buildings aren't shown, but you can see that how the wall outside of the site would be affected. At the moment, it's really just this bit that's left on this side. So the rest has been removed. The applicant would reinstate the wall, but to a height of 60 centimetres so that vehicles can see over the top of it. On this side, part of the wall would need to be reduced in height to 60 centimetres for the same reason. So this is units 1 to 3. So this is the front of units 1 to 3. Unit 3 would have a slate roof. Units 1 and 2 would have a standing seam zinc roof. Units 1 and 2 faced mostly in random stone rubble. Unit 3 faced mostly in vertical timber cladding, and also on the side of Unit 3 here. This is the back of Units 1 to 3. So again, vertical timber cladding and slate roof for Unit 3, standing stone rubble and standing seam zinc for Units 1 and 2, and some vertical cladding as well. This the side of Unit 1, and this is the bin store here. So this is the proposed farmhouse, the front of the proposed farmhouse. Slate roof is proposed with random, rough cast render finish in a light colour, some timber cladding, and the chimney would be random stone rubble. The rear of the site, the same materials and the other side of the site. This is section drawings that show how units 1 to 3 would relate to the properties at Edginswell Orchard. So there's a steep bank leading up to Edginswell Orchard, and obviously they're a lot higher up than units 1 to 3 would be. This is another section drawing showing how the farmhouse would relate to the Edginswell farm buildings. So again, these would be higher up than the farm buildings. So these are the key issues set out in the officer report. We found that the proposal is compliant with most of these. We've worked with the applicant to get to that point. We still think that the proposal is unacceptable as regards housing supply, in that although it would provide 5 new housing units, and Torbay can't meet its housing targets at the moment, we believe that the proposal would be contrary to a number of key policies within the Torbay local plan and Torquay neighbourhood plan. And for that reason, we think that the proposal is contrary to policy H1, which deals with housing in the local plan, and policy SS3, which deals with sustainable development in the local plan, and policy TS1, which deals with sustainable development in the neighbourhood plan. In addition to that, we believe that the proposal was contrary to policy DE1 and DE4, and in terms of visual impact, and also policies SS10 and HE1 in terms of impact on heritage assets. In broad terms, we think that the proposal was overdevelopment. We think that the size of the dwellings and the amount of hard standing between them would have a negative impact on the current landscape value of the site, which is currently a green space. And we think that the relationship between the two farmhouse buildings and the farm buildings at Edginswell Farm would be unacceptable in heritage terms, and would have an unacceptable impact on the setting of those buildings. We don't think it's appropriate to have a farmhouse design on the sites, given that Edginswell Farm already has a farmhouse. And we think that the design is still quite urban in character. So we don't support the proposal for those reasons. This is a list of policies that are considered in the neighbourhood plan and the local plan, which I won't go back through. And this is these are the reasons for refusal in the officer report. So, housing and sustainable development, on the basis that we consider that the proposal is contrary to a number of other policies in the local plan and neighbourhood plan. We think that the proposal represents overdevelopment. We think it would have an unacceptable impact on the landscape character of the site and the Edginswell hamlet. We think that the proposal would have an unacceptable negative impact on the listed buildings at Edginswell Farm, and due to the size of the farmhouse buildings in particular, and the materials palette and the relationship to their setting. And we think there's insufficient information at the moment to assess the impact of the works that would be needed to the listed wall, much of which has already been done, and with sections removed and reduced in height. We don't agree, the applicant doesn't agree that the wall is a listed structure, and has provided an addendum to their heritage assessment, which identifies it as being a non-designated heritage asset. I think there is scope, if we could reach agreement on the status of the wall, I think there is scope for the proposed changes to be found to be acceptable, but we don't think that we've got that information at the moment to enable us to make that call. The last reason for refusal was planning balance, which is really wrapping all of these up. The proposal does have public benefits. It will provide housing at a time when the council can't demonstrate an adequate supply of housing. It would create jobs for local people during construction as well. But we don't think these public benefits are sufficient to outweigh the harm that we've identified, and which is set out in the report. I won't go through them now, but if councillors are minded to approve the application, we have a list of conditions that we would ask to be attached to any approval. I think that's, yep, I think that's...
Thank you very much, Mr Davies. I'll call on Mr Mike Cowdrey from Torquay Neighbourhood Forum to address the meeting against the application. You're obviously aware of the 5 minutes, Mr Cowdrey, but the clerk will still let you know if you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, and good evening. This statement has been reviewed and approved by the steering group of the Torquay Neighbourhood Forum. The Forum, in its consultee response, noted a number of non-compliances with development policies, particularly with regard to the environment, compatibility of the appearance of the buildings with the hamlet, and highway access. Thus, this cannot be regarded as sustainable development. The Forum requests that this application is refused. We acknowledge the concerns about the shortfall of housing delivery, but remediation must not be at the expense of sustainable development and adverse impact on the location. It is essential to preserve the characteristics of the remaining rural villages and hamlets in Torquay, that is Edginswell, Cockington and Maidencombe. The proposal would be overdevelopment in this context. Similarly, the urban design would conflict with the current appearance of the hamlet and the adjacent listed buildings. The Forum supports the officer's recommendation for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr Cowdrey. I now call upon Mr Andrew Passmore to address the meeting for the application. You have 5 minutes, Mr Passmore, and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Have we got the first image, please? Okay, well, I'll start anyway. I think Sean...
No, it's fine, Mr Passmore. We'll get it up for you. No need to rush. Is that good?
That's good, thank you.
We'll start the clock now.
Okay, thank you very much. I'd like to start by reminding members that as Sean said, the application area falls within the Edginswell Future Growth Area, which is allocated under policy SS2 for residential development, and to the south-west of Edginswell Lane allows for up to 550 residential units in this area. Next image, please. On this image, we're showing that the scheme is a completely new proposal from that the council was asked to previously approve, and it should not be confused with that earlier development I highlight this due to the many references made by officers during the course of this application to comments made by the planning inspector when they were considering the other scheme. And therefore, those comments do not relate to the current proposals. Additionally, changes have been made to the scheme to that initially submitted, which have addressed various officers' concerns, including those on the heritage. And as you heard earlier on this evening, I remind you that you are asked to consider this scheme on its own merit and not on other schemes. Moving to the reasons for refusal, on impact on heritage assets, it is recommended to refuse the scheme by reason of, for the buildings, their size, unsympathetic design, height and elevated position. The scheme has, as I've just said, responded to comments on the previous application and comments by officers in this application and is considered to be appropriate to the area, being a high quality design for such a small scheme. As Sean's image is shown, and if you can move on to image, next one please, the site sits relatively low in the landscape and the height is not necessarily an issue when compared to the surrounding buildings. The farmhouse building that has been criticised tonight is a style that has not been previously commented on as being harmful to the local area. Unlike the Edginswell orchard and the paddock developments which were highlighted to you earlier, these which sit around Edginswell Hall have large detached houses of a very much urban design. This scheme reflects the historic nature of Edginswell, as the images here and shown earlier in colour by Sean clearly show. The design rationale takes the historic environment and hamlet character of Edginswell into consideration, in particularly the presence of farmhouses and long two-storied agricultural buildings with pitched roofs, different to the more urban forms of those of the schemes you previously approved. Therefore, we consider designs appropriate to the hamlet character of the area. The proposed reason for refusal on heritage assets contains factual inaccuracies that will affect your decision-making and determination of the policy. Firstly, it misinterprets the relevant policies in the MPPF and the relevance in relation to the Listed Building and Conservation Areas Act 1990 and the Levelling Up Act 2023. Harm to setting alone, as proposed in the reason for refusal, cannot be a reason for refusal. There must be identified harm to significance of a heritage asset. Therefore, on this point alone, the application cannot be refused for this proposed reason. The wording in the reason for refusal is different to the assessment wording in the officer's report. And I remind members that the courts have stated that in relation to heritage matters, faultless decision-making must be made on the back of recorded methodical approaches to conclusions. Secondly, notwithstanding the above, the subsequent planning balance fails to reference the significant public benefit of the inclusion of an adoptable highway that forms part of Torbay's active travel infrastructure network. The link through the site will not just benefit those living at Edginswell, but the wider community of Torbay and visitors alike. I would remind members...
1 minute left for speaking.
Okay. I remind members that the road as now designed is not required to enable the development to proceed. Rather, the applicant has included this as an act of goodwill to the council in relation to the provision of a future cycle link through the site. And please just scroll through the rest of the images. This will not come forward without the scheme. Therefore, in my opinion, the summary planning balance is wrongly skewed in favour of harm the public benefits. On the issue of insufficient information, the statement of heritage significance mentioned has been provided and has been reviewed by officers. Therefore, I fail to comprehend how an application can be refused on the grounds of lack of information where this information has been provided. Whether the ward is listed or not, the information is still within the documentation supplied. On overdevelopment, again, I would highlight the 550 units allocated in the area, of which we have only 5 in the scheme in 2 buildings. I fail to see how this is overdevelopment.
That's the 5 minutes up, I'm afraid.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Passmore. So, committee members, I'll now invite you questions to the planning officer. Please may I remind members questions should only cover matters not raised in the presentation. Councillor Billings and then Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Davies, could you unpack and respond to the point that was made by the Speaker in relation to harm to the setting and the significance of an asset? I think there was some difference of opinion between the applicant and yourself. If you could set out the two different views and where you stand on that, please.
Yes, I can answer that to a degree. In reaching a view about the impact of the proposals on heritage assets, I've relied on our advice from our principal historic environment advisor, in the same way that I've relied on advice about trees from our senior arboriculture advisor. His advice to me is in the officer report, but I'll paraphrase it. It says, issues remain with proposals for plots 4 and 5 with regard to their position within the site, chosen design approach with reference to a farmhouse, considered to be an over-domestic approach to those plots. The additional building type, so the farmhouse, with an additional material palette would be harmful to the significance of the identified heritage assets, would confuse the clear narrative and hierarchy of adjacent historic development of a singular principal farmhouse, the existing listed building and its relationship with surrounding ancillary agricultural structures. Consider that a more successful design approach, which would potentially limit the harm caused to the identified heritage assets, would be to continue the architectural language used for plots 1 to 3 and explore the use of an L-shaped form of development within the northwest corner of the site, which wraps around a central yard, to allow the southern area of the site, which is considered to be the most sensitive with regards to the setting of nearby heritage assets, to be free of built development and provide a more substantial landscape buffer to the group of listed buildings. And that would likely require the reduction in the quantum of proposed housing from 5 to 4 and significant alterations to the current proposals. I can't speak to the legislative background of listed buildings, but I would just say very briefly that we've advised the applicant that now the other aspects of the site have been resolved to a point where we can support them, that the way forwards, we believe, would be for, in the event that this application is refused, for the applicant to go through design review panel with a altered design that reflects the comments that have been made, in advance of a detailed pre-application inquiry with us, so that hopefully we could support a fresh application if one were to be made. But as I say, I can't speak to the legalities of listed buildings.
I should have said at the start, our Principal Historic Environment Officer sends his apologies. Unfortunately, he couldn't make it today. So that's one of the first comments. So I think one of the sequence of events is important, and that consistency with the appeal decision and the inspector, and you saw very helpfully with that presentation that we saw from Mr. Passport, it's really clear. So we have given a sequence of heritage advice linked to design, linked to urban design, linked to the master plan. And master plans aren't a rigid blueprint. That, you know, they're not to be followed rigidly, but that went through its own consultation. So time has evolved, a sequence of events have happened, and you've got this application in front of you. So it's useful to see where we've come to get to this point. But I think from a heritage point of view, if we need to look, and your recommendation remains as refusal, we have delegated authority to refine those reasons for refusal within that scope of that. But I think we've both given a lot of background going round the point, but I think it's been clear in terms of heritage advice during this application and previously.
Thank you, Mr. Davies and Mr. Blackwell. So I think I heard the applicant say that we couldn't rely on harm to the setting, we could only rely on harm to the significance of an asset. I think that's what I think I heard said. And you've drawn my attention, Mr. Davies, to an excerpt from our Principal Historic Environment Officer where it refers to harm to the significance of an identified heritage asset, which I think addresses the concern that I heard articulated, and I appreciate that. If my recollection was incorrect, then please say, but I think that's the key point, isn't it?
I think we're trying to be consistent in our advice, and I don't know whether someone has a comment, just because you hear us speaking quite a lot, whether we use our legal position.
Well, yes, Chairman, the committee has to have regard to the impact on the setting of listed buildings in relation to the development and the desirability of preserving the setting of listed buildings. Relevant to that is the impact in terms of its significance to that asset. So they're both relevant, but yes, this committee has to consider the impact on the setting of the listed buildings.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mr. Cattrall.
It's something that we discussed at length recently around a circular-shaped development in Torquay. So we have talked about the setting before.
Councillor Fox.
Thank you, Chair. Just some help really again from Sean. We've heard mention of the future growth area and 550 dwellings in the area which was shown on one of the plans, the pink area, I think it was. And my question really is, how does this proposal of just 5 dwellings, how does it relate to this much bigger total of 550? Are they compatible?
So I think there's 2 aspects to it. If the application is approved, then we would secure a bridleway through the site and up to it. Hope the aspiration would be that it would continue up to the larger housing area. So it relates in that way. The second way, I think, is what the actual master plan says about Edginswell Hamlet, and I think it's I'm finding it. I think it's important to note that the master plan is illustrative. The site that we're talking about today hasn't been allocated for housing in a formal sense of the word. The master plan does talk about it though, and it says on page not quite sure what the page number is, but on figure 13, I think that's right. Sorry. Yeah, on figure 13, it identifies that at points 9 to 10 to allow for some village expansion to Edginswell in a sympathetic hamlet character. So it's not. So I think it relates to the master plan in that way. So the area has been recognised as having potential for some limited housing development. There's no number associated with that, and if the site is provided either today or in future, is approved either today or in future, we would seek to secure a bridleway through it to link up with the main housing area.
If I could just follow on from that very briefly, so is it your view that this development could sit alongside the bridleway satisfactorily, and would you consider 5 dwellings too high?
The bridleway certainly could be delivered if this is approved. Then the bridleway would the bridleway would go in between the 2 blocks of proposed housing. So So the bridleway would run through here, and it would exit the site here, basically. This isn't working, is it? Okay, so it would exit the site there. So yeah, certainly it can be provided. I don't think that I don't think that we necessarily consider that 5 houses is too much. I think we consider that 5 houses in their current positions and at their current sizes is too much. And as our principal historic advisor has advised, we think that the housing should really be would be better, a more successful scheme arranged in an L shape in the northwest corner of the site. Whether that's 4 or 5 units, I think the applicant would need to demonstrate, you know, whether it works with 5 or whether it needs to be reduced to 4. I think that's where we are with it.
Councillor Tolchard.
Thank you, Chair. It's very helpful, actually, that slide is up there at the moment. It's actually quite a wide site, but and it didn't actually really strike me when we went to the site visit today, but that was the parking capacity, the amount of parking spaces available. I mean, looking at that, and I know it's sort of indicative, it looks as if there's sort of probably two for each unit, but no additional parking, i.e. visitor parking. And I know reference has been made to an agreement for double yellow lines to go up Edginswell Lane when you turn left out of the site, which would then preclude those vehicles that were parked there today parking. I'm not quite sure where additional visitor parking would go. Thank you.
So within the site itself, although it's not shown on that plan, there is room for 2 parking spaces for each house. If it were to be approved, we would probably put a condition on to have them lined out so that people know where they could park. There's also a turning head for a refuse, a Swissco refuse lorry. We had again asked for that to be lined and hatched out so that no one parks in it. There is no visitor parking identified on the plans. So visitors, I think, unless they could, you know, unless somebody was out and they could, you know, park there, I think they might have to park on Edginswell Lane. To the south of the site, there is limited room to park on Edginswell Lane. To the north of the site, there is more scope with the double yellow lines in place. There's more scope to park after the double yellow lines, and up to the point where the A380 crosses Edginswell Lane. So I think people probably could park, but so this is the A380. This is Edginswell Lane, and the site is here. So people, there's scope to park sort of in this kind of area. So yes.
One of the tensions and design challenges about urbanisation, isn't it? So the idea of the ability to provide more and more parking, I think that, you know, there was quite a tight brief, quite an understanding as part of the application to make sure that that was kept to the minimum, and you still left with that amount of urbanisation. So visitor parking would only add to that urbanisation and that greater level of tarmac and open space.
Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. Mr Davies, I wonder if you could go back to the last slide we just had up, the one that had the future growth area shown.
Oh yeah.
I think. We've talked about this being indicative. I just wonder if you could help me understand. The indicative on a plan to me would be a sort of like a broad circle drawn on, whereas on here we seem to follow natural boundaries, and there's a defined area where something is or isn't. Where does the rationale for saying that the future growth area is indicative come from, please?
Okay. So in terms of the housing in the vicinity of the site, I can't actually show you show you this, but figure 13 of the master plan does sort of provide, you know, what I would think of as being indicative shading. In terms of the whole thing, the title of the document itself, of the master plan document itself, is
I think Mr. Passmore also showed on his slide, which we went back to, which showed clearly the evolution. So the master plan, which was very helpfully put on there, which led that indicative plan, which then led to the previous decision that was dismissed, and then the latest decision, and now this application. So we need to focus on this application now.
Appreciate that, Mr. Blackwell, but what we got up on screen is an extract from our local plan, isn't it? And that's the relevant planning policy more strongly than the master plan, which is an SPD.
Material consideration.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Okay. So material. So the master plan is a material consideration. Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Boo. Any other questions, councillors? Thank you. Well, if there aren't, I'll just open up to the debate now, please. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. So, leaving aside the totality of everything, I just wanted to consider some of the reasons that have been discussed in terms of refusal and just unpick those slightly, if I may. And congratulations, Mr. Davies. The report that you've prepared on this is extremely detailed and superb, which is why I'm struggling to navigate through it at this point. So thank you so much for the work that's gone into this. It is a compliment. It's a very clear compliment. It's a very clear compliment. I thought this report was very detailed, and the work you put into this is very clear. Your second reason, overdevelopment, the scale and extent of the 5 proposed dwellings. I just wonder, members, whether the scale and the extent of the 5 proposed dwellings is something that actually concerns us, because I hear the point that's been made in relation to the impact on the heritage asset adjacent. I think that's a separate point as to whether the scale and extent of 5 proposed dwellings. To me, if you put these and laid them out in a different way on the site, I personally wouldn't feel so concerned. To me, to the extent there's a concern, it's the size and massing of, forgive me, members, it's the scale and massing of Unit 5, particularly on that gable end, next to the heritage buildings, recognising the tallest part of that proposed unit is closest to the boundary of the heritage asset, rather than the fact that there are 5 large properties on the site. I just wondered whether what views other members had on that point.
I mean, I can put in my penny's worth. I think the Unit 4 and 5 they're far too big, far too high, and therefore, you know, significantly affecting the setting of his heritage properties. You know, smaller, not on that site, so it doesn't affect them. Fine, but as it stands, too big, too high, too imposing on the heritage assets. I think personally, also the aim was to, you know, still maintain the hamlet feel of Edginswell, like Cockington, and at the moment it's too much is suburban and too much concrete on the ground. bit of movement, I'm sure maybe something else would be different, but as it stands at the moment, I'm with the officer on this.
Can you confirm, are you suggesting that that overdevelopment reason for refusal is inappropriate? Is that where this discussion is heading? Or I'm just slightly conscious of time and coming to a conclusion. Sorry.
No, it wasn't so much that. The overdevelopment point I think is separate from. I was just looking at the wording of the way we've got it, and the scale and the extent of the 5 proposed dwellings. To me, if there were dwellings of that size laid out differently on the site, I probably wouldn't have so much of a concern. To me, it's the layout and their scale. But sort of that was more a personal view on that, perhaps, that I just wanted to test out with other members. I just wanted also sort of just testing through these reasons. If we're taking on other applications, I've seen our designing out crime officers referring to the need to get sight lines, and we've got an access way that runs through the site here. That's a sight line that goes through it. I just wonder, members, if you embody that principle, whether you necessarily have excluded the layout of an L shape that officers referred to in terms of something that would be more satisfactory. I just wonder whether, if you're going to have a straight line through the centre of the site, this is the only thing you could do. Just wanting to test for myself that I'm entirely comfortable with these reasons for refusal.
Be very careful about using this process as the pre-application advice process and deciding what could and couldn't be appropriate. Are you searching for another reason for refusal, or are you looking at the route through and sight lines? Because I'd just like to be completely clear on where the debate is going.
I was wanting to assure myself that I'm happy with these reasons and nothing more. And I've seen on another application in my a discussion that was quite contentious in my ward. The designing out crime officer had been very clear that they wanted sight lines going through it, and I just wanted to assure myself that that we were therefore sound with these reasons for refusal.
Councillor Fox.
I think I'm broadly in agreement with Adam on this one. I'll probably go slightly further and say these. I agree with the reasons that the officers have put forward, and I'd be willing to move a refusal on that basis if that helps move us on.
Do I have a seconder?
Very happy to second on that basis, Chair.
Then those in favour?
Okay, that's unanimous in favour.
Gosh, we've still got one more to go. Grief.
That concludes that application. We're going to move on to another one for those who want to leave. Moving on to item number 8, to consider application for 12 to 14 Victoria Street, Paignton, application number P/2024/0293. The clerk has confirmed there is one registered speaker for this item, so I now call on Scott Jones to introduce the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Firstly, in terms of an update to members since the committee report was published, I've got in the recent days a couple of further consultee comments. Firstly, from the Council's waste officer, who's considered the revised waste layout and the current layout now has satisfied previous concerns and is considered to be a suitable alternative arrangement. The comments also detail a request for a formal waste management plan to help demonstrate the development will apply the waste hierarchy of the council. I would just comment that that is already addressed in the proposed conditions within the committee report. Second comment received from the highway officer, and they are now satisfied that the cycle storage arrangements are generally acceptable and therefore raise no objections on those points. So moving on, the site is located within the Paignton town centre and consists of an end of terrace building set on the corner plot with the principal elevation fronting Victoria Street, side elevation fronting Commercial Road here, and then the rear elevation a narrow service lane. The site has 2 established commercial uses with Boots occupying the ground floor and lower ground floor. With the ground floor retail space and the lower ground floor being associated servicing. The 3 upper floors are office space which previously held a solicitor's firm prior to the use ceasing approximately 10 years ago. So just for confirmation, the application seeks full planning permission for the change of use of the empty office space at first, second and third floors to provide 12 flats, 8 being 1-bed units and 4 2-bed units, with integrated waste storage, cycle storage and some minor external modifications to support the residential conversion. These include 2 small dormers, the partial replacement of windows, and some minor ground and lower ground floor internal and external changes to provide access and storage needs. Just in terms of the context of the site, this is the local plan allocations designations map. And the site is just highlighted in yellow here, just showing it at the heart of the town centre, which is the light blue shaded area, and confirms that Victoria Street frontage is a primary shopping frontage. The site also lies in the Old Paignton Conservation Area, is in a community investment area as well. In terms of the Paignton neighbourhood plan, there are no specific site allocations for this site. However, there is just simply some reference to relevant policies within the town centre and seafront mapping. Just moving on to a couple of aerial views for members. So here we have the side of the building and looking down Victoria Street here. As you can see, it sits on a prominent corner plot. Obviously it's very central. The Victoria Street element is strongly commercial, but it quickly transitions to a mixed commercial residential character. So we've got Dendy Road here, which is residential. Got the former Lime Tree pub here, which is currently being converted to flats. And also Dendy Road over to the left-hand side of the slide as well is largely residential in character. Moving on to the wider context, obviously it just shows that the area quickly transitions and there's some various open green spaces in close proximity, which would support obviously future residential occupiers. And proximity to the seafront as well is quite close. Obviously you're aware Paignton Town Centre also has a bus depot, which is quite close to the site, which is again highlighted yellow there. So you've got the bus depot here and obviously the train station as well. So this is just a photo taken across Victoria Street and Commercial Road. Got the modern frontage of Boots. This is the existing entrance to the upper floor offices and the connected reception area via that access. We see some pleasant ornate windows, dormers, and obviously the flank elevation here. You get to start at the lower ground floor, coming into view here towards the rear of the site. So this is a side view from Commercial Road. So this is the area largely where some of the external changes are going to be present. It's got timber sash windows, but slightly less grand in scale and lacking of the ornate surround detailing of the older part of the building at the front. And going around towards the rear corner with the service lane. Again, we have some timber sash windows, and then moving on to more modern landscape sort of orientation with metal casements there. And this is a view across the rear access lane to the property opposite. Also got some internal views. So these are the side views. So this is the sort of internal side view, not visible from the public. This is looking across at adjacent properties within the rear of the Victoria Street Terrace. And then this is obviously just looking across Commercial Road. Just quickly running through the existing upper floors. Obviously it's, say, 3 floors of office space, generally arranged in quite small partitioned offices with some slightly larger elements. Obviously the uppermost floor is a partial 3rd floor. And existing lower and existing ground and lower ground floors here. So we've got the main retail element of Boots outside of this, and this is the current entrance to the office space. Then to the rear, we've got a stairwell that serves both the existing commercial uses. Won't run through the existing elevations too much. Obviously, you've seen the form of the building within the photos previously shown. Obviously, there's a variation in height and detailing there. And so moving on to the actual proposal. So as mentioned, this is a full application for the change of use to the 3 upper floors to provide 12 flats with integrated waste and cycle storage and some minor external modifications. So in terms of the internal layout proposed, this slide shows the 2 principal main floors, which will each hold 5 flats. All units have a principal kitchen and living space, a separate bath or shower room, and as mentioned, either 1 or 2 bedrooms. Access is gained from the 2 stairwells, so we've got a stairwell here, which will serve the flats towards the front of the building, and then a stairwell in the bottom corner here, which will serve the rear flats. So moving on to the uppermost floor, this provides 2 one-bed units. Again, these will be accessed through the front stairwell, and there's also access to the flat roof area from both sections of the slightly tall elements of the building. As shown, faintly shown on the slide, but here you can see the arrangement of the proposed 48 solar panels for some renewable energy production within the proposal. So as mentioned, the proposal includes some integral changes to the ground floor and lower ground floor to support the residential conversion. So this includes the existing office entrance here is to be separated and proposed as a bin store. A new residential access will be created within the existing glazed element on Commercial Road, which will provide you access to the front stairwell. So moving down the side of the building, Commercial Road, so at lower ground floor, we've got some interventions within this elevation. So we've got a proposed cycle store here. We've got a replacement emergency access for the retail use. And we've got a secondary bin store that's been introduced through the course of the application to provide adequate waste storage facilities. And the existing entrance to the rear here on the corner is to be reglazed with a new door and to provide the residential access only. So as mentioned, the external elevation changes are limited. This is the front elevation where we have one of the two proposed dormers. So we've got a small dormer introduced here facing Victoria Street, finished with timber sash windows to match. And we've got a new timber door here to the waste storage area. All the windows within this elevation will be refurbished and fitted with secondary internal glazing. Moving to the side elevation facing Commercial Road. Again, these windows will be refurbished, and also the smaller sash windows along this elevation here will also be retained and refurbished and fitted with secondary glazing. So we've got the ground floor and lower ground floor changes here. So we've got the new residential access, then moving down the site. So we've got the bike store entrance, the new emergency access for the other use, and then the waste storage entrance here. So these interventions will be either timber or timber faced and are considered acceptable. And move on to the remaining sort of public facing elevation here. So we've got the secondary residential access. We've got timber sash windows refurbished here. This window here is shown with a slight casement sort of style, but we have received revised plans that confirm that the existing modern window will be replaced with a timber sliding sash window. And then moving around the building, the sort of modern landscape single glazed metal windows will be replaced with UPVC double glazed windows. And that's the same for the sort of inward facing elevations, just running through here, which are away from public view. The second new dormer is tucked away within the mansard roof here, facing back towards the Victoria Street element of the building. So quite small in scale and not visible. And this is just finishing off with the roof view, again showing the arrangement of the solar panels. So obviously the committee report outlines the key material considerations that have informed the recommendation to members. Obviously the principle, as reported, there is broad support for residential use within the upper floor and town centre context. The offices have been empty for 10 years and the residential use will provide 12 units of residential accommodation where there is currently a housing shortfall in the area. The location is very sustainable and the use is compatible with the mixed commercial and upper floor residential character. And there is broad policy support across the local plan, neighbourhood plan and national guidance towards residential uses within town centres where they can add to the vitality and viability of these areas. As mentioned, in terms of housing supply, there is a shortfall and the tilted balance is obviously engaged, which guides that planning permission should be granted unless any adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. As reported, there are no adverse impacts identified that outweigh the benefits for this proposal. In terms of design and heritage, the physical changes are limited. The dormers are acceptable. The retention of the sash windows facing Victoria Street and Commercial Road is positive, as is their refurbishment. The integral changes to supply the access and servicing are suitably detailed and are deemed acceptable as small-scale necessary interventions to these elevations. In terms of amenity, the proposal will provide a good standard of accommodation for future occupiers, presents adequately sized units with good levels of light and outlook in what is a sustainable location near to employment opportunities, entertainment facilities, services, etc., public parks and the like. There are also no undue impacts on the adjacent occupiers. In terms of highways and movement, the development, much like the existing office use, is absent of parking facilities. However, this is considered acceptable in the context of the number of units, their size, and the town centre context. Planning policy does guide that parking provision can be flexible in town centres, and aside all the local services, obviously Paignton Town Centre does benefit from a bus depot and a train station in close proximity, which offer good access to public transport. Through work within the application, obviously the development is also now supported by a policy compliant level of cycle parking, which is obviously important within a car-free development. In terms of ecology, there is no ecological value to the site and is exempt from sort of biodiversity net gain requirements. However, the site is due to the site's proximity to the Berryhead SAC, the additional recreational pressure of the additional units should be mitigated in line with the report and the recommendation. Also in accordance with policy guidance, the enhanced nesting facilities which are proposed should be secured through a planning condition. In terms of flood risk and drainage, the proposed conversion scheme will not alter the building or its impact in terms of surface water drainage, and the upper floor conversion is supported by the council's drainage engineer with no undue risk from flooding identified. In terms of low carbon and energy, the application is supported by an energy statement that highlights a number of measures to reduce energy usage through the conversion, make the building more efficient. And the proposal also includes the provision of renewable energy production through the rooftop solar array, which is supported. Finally, in terms of secure design, the application package includes designing out crime elements, and it deems that obviously the finer detail of these should be secured through a planning condition to ensure that suitable elements are integrated within the conversion. So the officer recommendation is one of approval, subject to the conditions outlined, with final drafting delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency. A legal agreement to secure a Berryhead ecological mitigation payment of £1,620, and the resolution of any new material considerations that may come to light following Planning Committee to be delegated to the Divisional Director of Planning, Housing and Climate Emergency, including the addition of any necessary further planning conditions or obligations. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. Now call upon Mr. Simon Blake to address the meeting for the application. You have 5 minutes, Mr. Blake, and the clerk will let you know when you have 1 minute remaining.
Thank you. Good evening, Chair, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Simon Blake, Director of Charles Blake Associates Architecture of Torquay, designers of the proposals before you today. I'm speaking on behalf of the applicant in support of this planning application, which is considered acceptable by your officers and recommended for approval. This application is before committee as the proposals are for 12 units, which is therefore classed as a major application requiring decision by members rather than under delegated powers. The proposals are for the conversion of the upper 3 floors of the building to create 12 flats. The former office space has been vacant for 10 years and is classed as a brownfield site. The new flats will be a mix of 1-bed and 2-bed units, all of which meet or exceed the minimum standards for sizing required by the Torbay local plan. They are in a sustainable location in the heart of the town centre, close to employment, public open spaces and bus and train links. The application is not only recommended for approval by your planning officer, it is also supported by your principal historic environment officer, the highways officer and the waste officer. The proposals meet with all national and local planning policies, including the adopted Paignton neighbourhood plan, and this has led to this recommendation of approval. The applicant is keen to provide high quality housing for the local community in the form of homes that provide a pleasant place to live, are energy efficient and bring life to the area. The reuse of vacant spaces above commercial frontages in town centres is encouraged nationally and can bring much needed residential dwellings. To minimise carbon emissions, the flats will adopt a fabric first approach, including high levels of insulation to the walls and roofs. New windows will be double glazed with existing retained windows benefiting from secondary glazing. Modern energy efficient heating systems will be installed and 48 solar panels will be provided to the mid-flat roof, which will generate approximately 19 kilowatts of electricity. Secure cycle parking is included in the design and the racks are suitable for e-bikes and users with mobility issues. We have worked proactively with your officers during the application process. Their feedback and guidance has proved very helpful. The proposals have been amended to positively address points raised by officers during the application process, as confirmed in the committee report. The result is a scheme which will positively benefit the local community by providing much needed low-cost homes. As concluded by your officers, the proposal accords with the Torbay local plan and all other material considerations. The proposals are acceptable in terms of the principle of development, the impact on the character of the area, residential amenity, waste and recycling, highway safety and flood risk. Approval of these proposals will enable the construction of 12 much needed high quality homes with no negative impact on the wider area. Torbay currently has a significant shortfall of land supply for homes, and these flats will most certainly address that shortfall and help people who need homes most. Therefore, I respectfully ask members of this committee to take a balanced planning view, support their officer's recommendation and approve this application. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Blake. Committee members, I'll now invite questions to the planning officer and a reminder to focus the questions only on matters not raised in the presentation. Thank you. Councillor Billings.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Jones, quick question. Condition 10, nesting season. Members, we saw on site that one of the panes of glass in the upper floor was out in the building, so therefore it appeared that there were pigeons entering the building. Can I clarify that condition 10, as drafted, wouldn't stop the owner from blocking up that window, because to do so wouldn't be vegetation clearance or demolition, and so he could quite legitimately go and block it up, subject to any provisions of the Wildlife and Countryside Act, and that condition wouldn't affect that. Would that be correct? Or have I misunderstood how it would apply, please?
I do not believe that condition would restrict any current building owner to replace the missing sash on that upper floor window.
Thank you for that clarification. And then my only other quick question, what we've seen in terms of the proposals coming forward, extremely positive, particularly given the fenestration with the windows. I think that's good. We'll come on to that and debate. Was there a reason we didn't include a rainwater goods condition, please?
So it's my understanding that the existing rainwater goods aren't going to be replaced. They're just going to be obviously cleared, tidied up, etc. So obviously that's not an element of the development, so it's not reported on.
Okay.
Councillor Strang.
The solar panels are obviously located on the roof there. Is there to be any battery storage for the energy generated, or is it delivered straight into the grid? If so, where would battery storage be located?
I'm not aware of any detailing on whether there is going to be battery storage or not. Obviously, there is, I think, some storage areas within the building, within the upper area of that sort of high corner element towards Commercial Road. But in terms of whether it's going to be stored on site or not and used. There's no detailing to that, I'm afraid.
Thank you.
Any further questions? Open up for debate. Councillor Billings.
I'd like to say how pleased I was at considering the details of this. This is just the sort of thing I think our area needs to see coming forward. It's providing much needed residential accommodation in the town centre. I think the proposals that we've got are very, very well considered. I think the constructive work that's clearly gone on between the applicant's agent, the applicant, and our officers has produced an extremely good proposal. I do think, members, we might want to include a rainwater goods condition. I appreciate the proposals are not to change what's there, but we've achieved such good results everywhere else. That would be my only comment, other than to say how pleased I was to see these proposals coming forward.
Councillor.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an ideal kind of development we'd want to see on this site, and yeah, if the officer feel, I'm happy to kind of defer to the officer's expertise on this one in terms of rainwater goods and not include that in the condition. I would personally be in a position to propose approval as per the recommendation in the officer's report.
I just personally want to say a couple of things. Number one, yes, I think it should be noted that the dealings of the applicant with the council has been exemplary. So that's very pleasing to see. And what I wanted to comment there was on the, it hasn't been used for 10 years. How quickly are we going to get on with it? And I only raised that because I noticed for the applicants actually based in London, their work is actually they do development in Greenwich and etc. So this is a bit out of their neck of the woods. So I don't want to have another one where we're stuck, where we've got the approval and then it's not happening. Hello. So that was just, have we got something on a time frame here like we have with other?
I mean, I totally agree. Over many years, we've seen that too many times, but there's beyond looking at a 2-year consent, there's nothing really worth. We just have to hope and assume and pray, if you're so minded, that the developer will get on and actually develop this brownfield site.
I agree. We've debated this before about shortening times, but ultimately we're here to consider an application in detail. We've heard the positives, so about coming to that conclusion, I think I don't see as officers we'd require that extra level of control. In terms of rainwater goods, that's something we normally tackle with listed buildings. That we don't particularly think that is that a reasonable condition, considering they'll be brought back to working order, thinking about losing materials to add some more materials in a kind of sustainable approach? Is it just aesthetics? It's something we normally just deal with listed building consents to control rainwater goods. So I'd leave it to you to continue the debate, but it's not normal we'd put those sort of restricted conditions on for something such a small detail. Consider the scale of the development.
Councillor Billings.
Turning to the timescales, I personally think the applicant's got to do a full building regs application. For a scheme like this, that will be a very large component of work, and I think that could very realistically occupy a time period. Then we've got conditions in here in relation to not starting in birds nesting season. So if you add the two together, I think your building regs application could very realistically take sort of 3-4 months. Then you've got a time period when you can't start. I think restricting it any beyond 2 years. Totally understand the sentiment, but we've done that in relation to other applications at this committee where it was been an outline consent, and we've reduced 3 years to 2. Unless officers correct me on this, this is a detailed consent, so this is 2 years before we start. Is that correct? Yeah. So I'd be okay on the timing. members haven't picked up the rainwater goods condition. I haven't heard that repeated around, so I sort of don't seem to be winning the hearts and minds at this point.
So on that hearts and minds, we've got a proposer. Have we a seconder?
I was going to second that proposal, if I may.
Or we can have one and one. Seconder, Councillor Strang. All those in favour? Unanimous.
That's unanimous, Chair.
Completes that application. An item, if Ed wants to leave.
Mr. Very patient. Mr.
Thank you
Blake.
very much, Mr. Blake. Now we'll finally move on to just a section on appeals. Over to Jim.
Thank you very much. So we conclude with the appeals report. We are data rich, and I was reminded by Anne Hawley as she left some of the information that we do need to share that we got out of the habit of as officers. So I've produced a quarterly report that I'll produce next time in the next quarter on appeals. They're incredibly important. We get a lot of data. We're under a lot of scrutiny and planning, don't you imagine? So just bringing those appeals through. You get them via email as members, but actually just put them in a report quarterly. You can see the trajectory, see we're making those quality decisions where we need to, and just some learning from that. So it would be good to have arrange an annual visit potentially to try and learn some lessons, maybe something that went well, maybe something that was overturned, but just trying to get an annual visit in place. But that report's there for you to note, and any questions separately, let me know. Thank you.
Due noted. I call the end of this committee meeting. Thank you very much, everyone.